When Izuku is 4, his mother, Inko, takes him to the hospital to see a quirkologist. 4 is the year that quirks often begin to express themselves, and as far as Inko can tell, Izuku has shown no signs. He certainly hasn't attracted any objects the way she can, and thankfully, he has not set fire to anything with precocious fire breathing. The doctor sits Izuku down in a chair and begins a basic checkup to start off with. Blood pressure, heartbeat. He puts a standard thermometer in Izuku's mouth to check his temperature, instructing him to hold it under his tongue and to leave it for several minutes. Little Izuku being little Izuku, he huffs and he puffs and does his best to summon up the flame within. In retrospect, he probably should have been tipped off the moment Izuku complained of a funny taste in his mouth. Regardless, when the doctor went to remove the thermometer from Izuku's mouth, only half of it came away in his hand. Ruefully, the doctor realizes that he should have stuck to protocol and used the quirk thermometer. It was a mistake to think that just because there was no outside sign of fire or thermal activity, that the boy wasn't capable of it. They schedule more tests. Scans. Thermometers of increasing heat tolerance. It's starting to become something of a circus, and Inko does her best to remain calm throughout all of this. Izuku, for his part, is just curious. Ultimately, they conclude that Izuku has inherited a mutated version of his father's quirk, not particularly uncommon. Most of the terms go over Izuku's head, but he tries his best to follow along. What he gets is that his father's stomach made a spark of electricity and that this ignited the gas already produced. Izuku's stomach ionizes it into plasma. Compared to his father, this is apparently the difference between a drop of rain and an entire monsoon. As a side effect, they note that Izuku can consume things a baseline human probably shouldn't, like mercury-filled thermometers. Later, in primary school, Izuku learns that stars are also made of plasma. He's delighted to be full of stars, and he imagines entire galaxies swirling in his gut. Since learning of his quirk, he's taken to eating odd things. His mother isn't sure if she should stop him or not. Chewing on metal is normally not okay, but knowing that it'll have no adverse effects on him changes that. Belatedly, she ends up telling him not to eat random things. If he's going to eat metal, he can purchase it from the hardware store. Visits to the hardware store become something like visits to the candy store, where an excited Izuku buys handfuls of nuts, bolts, and screws to snack on like they were trail mix, whilst a bemused Inko watches. The staff soon adjust and are always happy to see their cutest customer. Iron has a tangy flavor to it, sort of, but not quite similar to a sour candy, that Izuku finds he enjoys. Nickel has a creaminess to it, though he finds copper bitter, and the less said about tin the better. Kaken asks him why he's chewing on bolts once. Because it's tasty, is all Izuku says. Kaken tries a bolt and spits it out, but Kaken also likes really spicy food, so Izuku's not sure he has taste buds anymore. Izuku is 7 the first time he vomits. His mother takes him to a carnival, and he's so excited he almost vibrates out of his chair. There's carnival food, although Izuku has already eaten a few ingots worth of metal, and then there are rides. Izuku's fine until he takes a ride on something called the twirler. It twirls all right. It twirls so hard and so fast that when it finally stops, Izuku stumbles a few feet, and Inko wisely guides him towards a bin. When he retches, it suddenly occurs to her that perhaps a person whose quirk involved plasma in their stomach should not be made to vomit the contents of said stomach. Fortunately, or unfortunately, it's too late to even warn Izuku, even if it's too late to reach the bin. His vomit is not what anyone expects. It is certainly not chunks of half-digested food, swimming in bile, and for that, everyone is a little thankful, Izuku included. It is not a burst of superheated air and plasma, and for that, everyone should be thankful, alas. Only Inko is aware of the potential danger, and she is the only one who is properly relieved. It is, instead, a small white-hot gooey mess that begins to cool almost immediately after leaving Izuku's mouth. Inko knows better than to touch it, but Izuku doesn't. He reaches out with his childish hands and scoops it up. Inko wants to tell him not to let it go because grabbing your vomit is very much not a polite thing to do, and certainly not hygienic. But the rest of her is still unsure what parts of normality still apply to Izuku, so she ends up only watching as the still slightly nauseous Izuku begins playing with the substance, rolling it into a ball as it cools. In short order, he's holding a somewhat spherical blob of silvery metal. It stands to reason that the boy who eats metal also pukes metal. Inko shouldn't be so surprised at the things Izuku does, but he always seems to find a way to simultaneously worry and impress her. Inko takes the metal to a quirkologist, who after initial testing, suggests she'd be better off seeing a geologist or some kind of engineer. Metal byproduct isn't incredibly rare, but it is uncommon, and they don't have the facilities to test the qualities of the metal. Izuku's weird puke metal turns out to be a steel alloy made up of the various metals he enjoys snacking on. That in itself isn't so remarkable, but after more tests, it turns out to be a surprisingly useful metal. The engineer she sees professes its usefulness, bandying terms she herself isn't too familiar with coefficients, scales. Her degree was in social services, not metallurgy. She thinks she gets the gist of shape memory alloy though. The general meaning seems to be that whatever weird metal Izuku made is quite useful, and could she possibly tell them the source of it? She politely refuses, citing personal reasons. She doesn't want to open up her son to that kind of scrutiny or pressure. When he's older, he can decide. They're disappointed, but understanding. They ask to keep the metal. Inko checks with Izuku, and he agrees. He can, after all, make more. Surely? Izuku does make more. He learns to shape them into figurines, little models of animals and people. Blobby, indistinct models, but each one he makes gets progressively more detailed. Shaping the blobs of metal with his fingers is hard though, so soon he learns to shape tools out of the metal first. It only takes him a few weeks to learn that he doesn't have to vomit to make the metal's chewing works just as well, but it does take a little longer. It's a lot more pleasant a sensation too, akin to chewing gum. Izuku runs lots of tests on his metals, creating rudimentary scales of his own. They are, for the most part, quite similar, although he finds that if he adds more zinc, he creates a harder metal, less malleable. Copper makes for very conductive metals, but they are also soft and squishy compared to the others. Inko is kind enough to let Izuku take over the garage, and he turns it into a workspace for all his figurines and tools. Particularly pretty and well-made ones get put on the mantle. He asks Kaken if he thinks he can be a hero. Kaken takes one look at him and snorts. What would you do, Deku? Spit metal at villains? And goes right back to blasting rocks across the lake. Izuku frowns, but he can't say Kaken is entirely wrong. The stars are all inside of Izuku. He has no way to get them out. Heroes like Endeavor can make the fire from any part of them. Izuku can't even cough it up if he tries. He stuffs a handful of lake sand and gravel into his mouth to take his mind off things. The gritty texture is nice, even if the overly sweet flavor isn't Izuku's favorite. He has a blob of glass to play with soon enough, and he makes it into a small starburst. For you, he says as he hands it to Kaken. It's got a soft gold tint to it, but the center remains a flare of orange, and it very much reminds him of Kaken. Kaken takes it with only mild hesitation. Izuku stares down at his collection of handmade figurines and baubles. He can't be a hero like All Might or Endeavor or Kaken, but Izuku knows heroes. He loves them. He's wanted to be like All Might since he was even aware who All Might was. But he thinks it's okay that he can't be like All Might. Kaken is better suited to being like All Might than he is. Although Kaken's attitude makes him more like Endeavor than All Might. He'd never say that to his face though, not without being prepared to run for a good handful of minutes. Izuku is full of stars, and he can't get those stars out of him in a way that is immediately helpful to heroics. But he can get them out in his metals. Plenty of heroes rely on devices or gadgets meant to assist or amplify their abilities. Rather than being like All Might, couldn't he be someone like Power Loader? Heroes have a dangerous job. Couldn't his metal make that job just a little safer? Nodding his head, he starts to work on his very first project, a shield. Midoriya Izuku cannot feel fire. It's a useful quality to have when your hobby involves pressing white-hot metals into shape with your bare hands. Rather than feel a terrible burning sensation, to Izuku's hands it simply feels like warm clay. His natural abilities make him well-equipped to create metal crafts and glass baubles, and his supportive mother helps this talent flourish, but there is one teeny little issue though. As hot as it is, Izuku's mouth is still only as big as a human mouth, and no amount of plasma in his stomach will change that. Midoriya Inko lets Izuku have a workshop, but she rather sensibly draws the line at a literal forge. Fortunately, an acquaintance of his father is willing to assist the young aspiring smith. Daruma Hoji is a blacksmith who is happy to lend his forge to the young man when it's not in use, for a small affordable rental fee. He even offers some tips and tricks to Izuku regarding, until now unconsidered, techniques such as quenching or tempering. Daruma Hoji is a traditional swordsmith, but Izuku has no interest in swords beyond a passing curiosity. This doesn't stop Izuku from making a few of his own under Hoji's tutelage, although he's careful to keep them blunt. "You could be an incredible hero," Hoji tells him, inspecting the dinner plate-sized buckler Izuku made years ago, maybe with a name like Masamune. Wait, now that one was taken ages ago, but I guess you could be the second coming. "That's very kind of you, Hajizan," says Izuku, wiping sweat from his brow. He only sweats when he exerts himself. Masamune, the samurai hero. He remembers reading about him and his ability to generate blades of light. "But I don't want to be that kind of hero." "Really? What kind of hero do you want to be?" "Never fear." "Why?" "For I am here. I want people to hold something I've made and think, I have no reason to fear because I have this." He traces the large D he carved into the shield. "I want to be the hero that inspires that kind of feeling." Hoji lets out a barking laugh, slapping Izuku on the back. "You're a great kid. World could do with more heroes like that. Now why don't you give me a hand with this frame?" Izuku blows glass like bubblegum and ends up with a round, green flask. Hoji graciously accepts the gift, remarking that Izuku is a boy of many talents. Izuku thinks they're all really the same talent when you think about it. They're walking home together one day when Izuku grabs Katsuki's wrists suddenly. Izuku's hands, like the rest of him really, are incredibly warm against his skin, but hours working metal have turned them rough and calloused. "Deku," Katsuki says in a tone that is incredibly patient for him, which really means it's only a half-angry snarl. "What the fuck are you doing?" Izuku looks up at him, and Izuku's eyes are so big and wide and full of so many things, and Katsuki is adrift and lost. And how can he breathe amongst the nebulae? How can he find his way amongst the stars? And then, "I'm measuring you, Kaken," Izuku says offhandedly, already returning to the task at hand. Somewhere, he has produced a loose tape measure and is busy using it to take all sorts of measurements. Katsuki's fingers, hand, his wrist. "I can fucking see that," he snaps, after regaining his composure. It only takes him a second or two because he has been dealing with Izuku for years now. "I'm asking why you see the fucking need to do this." Izuku, somewhat predictably, does not respond immediately, and when he does, it does not answer his question at all. "Did you know you share a lot of similarities with Ingenium?" "Deku, I don't even fucking know who that is." It's a testament to their bond of childhood friendship, Izuku thinks, that Katsuki has remained patiently calm through this. Or at least as patiently calm as he ever is. A new hero. Well, not that new, but there were some videos of his latest battle against the Scarecrow villain. He uses his quirk a lot like you do. But Katsuki's patience, as exceptional as it is for Izuku alone, reaches its end soon enough. As interesting as I'm sure that asshole's fight was, it does not explain why you are fucking measuring me. Izuku has the unmitigated gall to give him a blank look, which does nothing to assuage Katsuki's desire to blow him to tiny pieces. "It's for armor, Kaken." This mollifies Katsuki, at least enough that Izuku goes unexploded today. "Why didn't you just fucking say so from the start, idiot?" He snaps, although he already knows the answer. Explaining things may as well be kryptonite to Izuku. Katsuki's not sure if he just can't explain his reasoning or won't. He's not sure it would make sense to anyone but Izuku either. Izuku, for his part, says and does nothing that would make it any clearer. "Obviously, you can't use gloves because you need your palms clear or maybe permeable fabric." "I can't do fabric. Maybe a mesh. Out of chain. Have to link a whole bunch of strands together, maybe weave it like a cloth." "Do you think Best Jeanist can affect metal fiber, or does it have to be organic?" "Actually, can he affect hair?" Izuku is doing the thing where he rambles and rants and Katsuki can't keep up. Apparently, breathing plasma is very efficient because Izuku never seems to take a breath. He knows from past experience, though, that if someone doesn't apply the brakes, Izuku will literally keep going for hours. Deku. Point. Now. He blinks, in the way that someone might when they realize they reached their destination whilst walking on autopilot. Right. Bracers. He declares, still explaining nothing. Bracers? Katsuki prompts. Bracers. I got the idea after watching Ingenium. You can use explosions for maneuvering, because your body still reacts to the force, you just have to absorb it, but how and where you absorb, it lets you control the direction. Izuku lifts Katsuki's arm and begins pointing at different parts. Like if you keep the arm straight and tense, then it's a clear vector like this, right? But if you bend your elbow, you can add angular momentum and turn your body. At last, Izuku pauses. So, bracers. He's definitely twitching. Deku, you do realize that explained absolutely jack shit? Izuku blinks again, because of course he forgets to explain the obvious leaps of logic. Like a hammer, he says, pointedly avoiding a condescending tone. If you were to swing your arm normally like this, and he makes a knife hand motion with his arm extended, you only have so much time to generate force. But if you spin around, and he demonstrates by twirling in place with his arm out, gently tapping his wrist against Katsuki, you wind up more and build more speed, and thus more force, right? Except most people can't spare the time to spin like that. But Ingenium expels gas from his arms like a jet engine, and you can use explosions. Katsuki rubs his wrist, a thoughtful scowl on his face. Izuku goes in for the kill, and you can't really use gloves because they'd impede your quirk, so bracers on the wrist for both defense and offense. Could also add stuff like knee pads or elbow pads, maybe even boots. They better look fucking cool. Deku. Izuku, Inko calls, knocking on his door. She waits a minute before cracking it open to peer at her son. Izuku is lost to the world, muttering to himself as he scribbles on sheets of graph paper. Diagrams and schematics are plastered over the wall, designs for everything from costumes to what Inko can only assume is some sort of portable barrier. Izuku, come on. It's time for dinner. Her matronly tone brooks no arguments, but even its maternal power is not enough to disrupt Izuku's trance. She reaches out to shake his shoulder, and his wide-eyed gaze snaps to hers. For a moment, she's looking at Hisashi, manic and muttering, eyes gleaming with secrets she could never understand, and the world is falling away out from under her feet. And then Izuku blinks. Oh, sorry. I'll set the table, he says, and Inko lets out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. I made Jayuden, she says, already halfway to forgetting the swirling stars she saw in Izuku's eyes. Izuku is truly Hisashi's son, and many who knew the man intimately would consider this cause for concern. Izuku's first set of armor is made to Katsuki's measurements, and it's as much to see if he can as it is for Katsuki himself. Izuku knows he'll grow out of it within the year regardless. The armor has the color of burnished brass, shaped and molded by Izuku's fingers and tools. Individual plates are held and secured with leather straps and small buckles. The helmet has a visor made out of a weird alien hybrid Izuku spat out using acrylic, fiberglass, and silicon, all of which left an awful bitter aftertaste in his mouth. The overall impression Izuku gets is one of the ancient Greek heroes they're reading about in history. Odysseus, Hercules, Achilles. Almost pointedly, a plate extends along the back of the heel. Combined with a new, larger buckler, Izuku can't help but feel a spear would complete the ensemble. Instead of a spear, perhaps a staff? Katsuki wouldn't need one, but Izuku thinks one could be useful for his own purposes. If he becomes the kind of hero that makes wondrous things, there are bound to be people who would try to make him stop. He should ask his mother if he could enroll in martial arts classes. Shinso Hitoshi is 12 when he meets the boy with stars in his eyes. It's a foggy morning by the beach, cold enough that it might snow and certainly cold enough that nobody in their right mind thinks that it's the perfect time to visit the beach. Nobody would ever accuse Hitoshi of being in his right mind, though, and so he likes to spend mornings like these clearing his head, as though the sharp winter sea air would clear away the clouds that haunt him. He's walked for scarcely more than 5 minutes when he comes across the hunched figure of a boy who can't be older than him, dressed in classic summer beach wear, which is just wildly inappropriate for the middle of winter. Hitoshi doesn't say anything at first, silently contemplating the strange intruder who has trespassed into what was meant to be his quiet meditative walk. It's hard to stay silent when he shovels a handful of sand into his mouth. "Why on this godforsaken earth are you eating sand?" is Hitoshi's first words to the strange boy. The boy looks at him, seeming very much like a startled deer caught grazing. The imagery is made only more intense when he chews a little. Hitoshi thinks, for a long moment, that the boy is not allowed to be surprised by this, as anyone with even a lick of common sense would agree the one chewing a handful of sand is the one who is surprising in this situation. After what feels like an eternity, the boy finally stops chewing to open his mouth to speak. "Hitoshi is not even sure how you chew sand." "It's sand. I like the crunch," says the boy who chews sand, managing to explain everything and nothing about this situation simultaneously. Hitoshi stares at him for a full 3 minutes, as his mind alternates between attempting to integrate this new knowledge into his already developed paradigm of how the world is, and simply ignoring this entire event and forgetting it ever happened. He personally would prefer to forget, but he doubts he will ever forget this moment. The boy doesn't swallow his sand, but Hitoshi isn't sure the alternative he chooses would make this any less surreal. Instead of swallowing, he simply lets it drool out in the form of white-hot glass, burning bright in his hands, but also clearly leaving him unharmed and decidedly unburnt. He proceeds to roll it into a small ball and then shish kebabs it onto a metal skewer. Is he saving it for later? Is this some weird spirit way of cooking things? Shinso Hitoshi has never wanted to ask someone what they were doing more than ever, but a life of living with his quirk has made him very good at keeping his mouth shut. He's beginning to grow convinced that he is interacting with some strange face spirit, and that if he says or does the wrong thing, the spirit will disappear. He's not sure he wants it to disappear. He feels like that would be sad, in the same way that the loss of a beautiful forest is sad. The spirit child rolls the skewer a bit as the ball cools and produces a string full of similar glass beads. "Oh, they were making a necklace. Pretty, isn't it?" they ask as they add the new bead to the others, and their eyes seem to glow with an inner light. Hitoshi makes eye contact for a second, and he can feel the pull of gravity, and it takes all his self-control and will tear his eyes away just after that single moment, afraid of what he'll see. Any words he could have said are gone now, so he answers with a nod. How else could he answer except with a nod? The Fae beams at him and tilts their head to the side. Without warning, they grab Hitoshi's wrist in calloused hands, well-worked fingers tight against his bones. Compared to the winter air, they may as well as have been made of fire, and for a moment, Hitoshi thinks he may actually be burned. Their intention becomes clear in a moment, though, as they produce a second string of much smaller beads and swiftly tie it around his wrist in a flash. "There," says the Fae, nodding in satisfaction, and then they return to sifting through the sand, presumably for the choicest handfuls of sand to make more beads. Hitoshi just half walks and half stumbles away, unsure of what just happened, but certain he has no desire to question it further. When Hitoshi arrives home, he looks at his parents with an expression of serene confusion. "I think I've been blessed by a spirit," he confesses to their own confused stares. Later that same day, Izuku tells Katsuki he made a friend. "Did they say you were friends?" is Katsuki's retort, because he has spent too many years dealing with what passes for Deku's thought processes. He accepted the friendship bracelet, Izuku says, with all the wise certainty of a 5-year-old. Katsuki says nothing at that, a conflict warring in his mind between his intense desire to shake Izuku back and forth ask where his friendship bracelet is, and his equally intense desire to present himself as above such childish concerns. Ultimately, his overwhelming desire not to engage in the futile exercise of attempting to explain the complete lack of common sense and logic present in the things Izuku says and does supersedes both, and he just grunts. Besides, he thinks there's no point in reading into why Deku gave some random chump a bracelet and not him, because knowing Deku, he probably did because it complemented the color of their shoes or something equally stupid. Despite the power of the friendship bracelet, it will be 3 years until they cross paths again. The dojo is full of students, all around the ages of 11 to 13. The fresh-faced new students are seated in the Seiza position in two neat little staggered rows along the matted floors, whilst the more senior members stand at the ready across from them. There are few decorations in the dojo, aside from a few scrolls of calligraphy and koans. There is also a lovingly crafted needlepoint that reads, "Live, Laugh," in gentle pink lettering, and then immediately under them in bold red needlework designed to be evocative of dripping blood, is "Fight." The master of the dojo paces back and forth before them, a hunched old man in a gray gi, covered in head to toe with wispy silver fur. Between his clenched teeth is an electronic cigar shaped like a half-peeled banana, and gently waving behind him is a furred tail. Aside from the tail and fur, the only other monkey-like feature of the retired pro hero Sun Wukong, the third, was his hand-like feet. "Auriai, my fresh-faced little baby chimps," he shouted suddenly, whipping around to face them with a fierce expression on his wizened face. "I am Sun Wukong, the third. Do you know what that means?" He doesn't wait for an answer before he plucks the cigar from his mouth and leans forward dangerously. "It means I am the Grand Master of the monkey style. Do you know why I look like a monkey? Do you think I was born like this? No." He whipped back around to resume pacing back and forth, this time gesticulating wildly with the hand holding his cigar, the other held clenched behind his back. "I was not born with this handsome exterior. I was gifted it by the monkey goddess herself. It was my prize for mastering the monkey style to an extent not even my predecessors had. Do you know what that means?" Izuku blinks slowly. Nobody else seems to be willing to answer, so he bravely volunteers by holding a hand up. "It means you're really good at kung fu." His response earns him a rapping from a staff he is certain wasn't in Wukong's hands a second ago, and certainly isn't anymore. Sun Wukong glares so fiercely, it's a wonder that Izuku's head doesn't explode into gore. "No, it means everything I just said was complete bananas. I was just monkeying around." His demeanor does a complete 180, and he tilts his head back to let out whooping laugh. "Get it? Monkeying around? 'Cause it's the name of my quirk. And I'm the Monkey King. Triple pun. Mahaha." He laughs for a good full minute before snapping back to seriousness fast enough to give himself whiplash. "But enough monkeying around. It's time to learn how to monkey around. You come to me as hairless little apes, but you will leave here as full-fledged monkeys. You will become agile, swift, cunning. If you want to learn how to fight like a gorilla, then you have come to the wrong place. Seriously, Mega Kong's dojo is on the other side of town. But here, you will master combat as it was meant to be mastered in all 4 dimensions." Someone raises a hand. "What's the 4th dimension?" they ask, and are immediately struck with the staff again for the crime of not learning from Izuku's mistake. Izuku, for his part, is really beginning to wonder where the staff keeps coming from. Almost as soon as it's out, it's gone again. "What is the 4th dimension, you ask? What are they teaching you kids these days?" "The 4th dimension is time, of course." He motions for one of the senior students, and they obediently carry over a training dummy. To master the monkey style is to master the art of timing, in both combat and comedy. If you cannot deliver a knockout joke, how can you hope to deliver a knockout punch? He stands a good 5 feet away from the dummy, seemingly completely serious. Then he suddenly starts making silly faces and hopping from foot to foot in front of it. You must disarm your enemy not only of their physical weapons, but of their mental ones, and when they let down their guard. What follows next is far too fast for Izuku's eyes to hope to catch, but for the briefest moment it appears as though Sun Wukong, the third, had disappeared, and when he was visible again, it was with a sonorous boom akin to thunder and standing in a wide stance with a palm outstretched. "Monkey's paw," he bellowed, loud enough to rival the sonic boom of his movement. Where stood the dummy, there was only the splintered lower half. The students' awe was palpable, Izuku's included. "Of course, you don't have to shout out your techniques like that. I just like to. Makes me feel like I'm in a shonen anime." Mahahaha. He took a long drag from his cigar and resumed his serious demeanor again. "Now, the basis of all learning is imitation. That means monkey see, monkey do. First, you will monkey see what I monkey do. And then, you will monkey do whilst I monkey see. Got it? If you got it, why are you still sitting? Stand up." After 30 minutes of practicing, The junior students are paired up with senior students for unknown training and practice for the last 30 minutes of their allotted hour. Izuku gets paired up with a young blonde boy with a thick, tufted tail. Izuku's senior introduces himself with a polite bow. "Hi, I'm Ojiro Mashireo." "Izuku." "Midoriya Izuku." He returns the greeting cheerfully, bowing a little deeper than his new senpai. "Please take care of me, senpai." Winter is made significantly more bearable to Katsuki the more of it he spends at the Midoriya household. Simply sitting next to Izuku is like having a space heater nearby, and much like a space heater, Izuku is content to do his own thing and let Katsuki do his while still keeping him pleasantly warm. As far as Katsuki is concerned, this is the great appeal of space heaters. That Izuku is much more comfortable to lean against than a space heater simply means he is the superior choice of household appliance. As usual, on this day Izuku is chewing some godforsaken substance and turning it into something less godforsaken, and so Katsuki busies himself with playing on a handheld console, with his back leaning up against Izuku's own back. All is well. Until Izuku starts grinding glass. "Deku, what the fuck?" Katsuki thinks he is perfectly entitled to his incredulous reaction as much as he simultaneously thinks he isn't. This is Midoriya Deku Izuku he is dealing with. Grinding glass is relatively tame compared to some of the weirder things he's done. Izuku doesn't even glance up from what he's doing, but Katsuki knows better than to expect anything else. Izuku has always been prone to hyperfocusing, but where he used to hyperfocus about pro heroes, he has moved on to weird crafts. He has a small disc of glass held in a vise and is slowly grinding it down with a pedal-powered wheel and a small metal frame that will presumably hold it beside it. Hodgson lent me this kit. It's been pretty useful for practice, but I still haven't gotten the hang of it. Izuku holds up the disc to one eye and squints through it, but apparently isn't satisfied because he pops it back in the vise and resumes grinding. Katsuki takes a moment to actually look at what Izuku was doing. Until now, he had essentially ignored him outside of sitting back to leech off his ambient heat. Now that he was actually paying attention to what he had laid out in front of him, it was fairly obvious actually. The schematics, the pieces, the already ground lenses. "A telescope, Deku?" Izuku just nods. Today a telescope, tomorrow binoculars, the future, who knows? Maybe some kind of zoom goggles. Adjustable lenses, or maybe variable zoom. Or both. Ooh, I wonder how you could translate UV into seeable light. I guess the same way you alter any frequency of light. And the Deku train has left the station. Katsuki turns around to his game again and calmly reaches for a pair of earbuds. He could, feasibly, tell Izuku to cram it, but listening to music achieves the same general goal. Tuning Izuku out is something he is down to a fine art by now anyway, and having to listen to music is a very small price to pay to avoid getting into arguments with his mother over the heating bill. With the advent of summer comes various summer traditions, and the most important one, as far as Bakugo Katsuki is concerned, is hiking up a mountain before dawn. Personally, as far as Midoriya Izuku is concerned, he doesn't quite see the appeal of an exhausting trek during a time he'd much rather be sleeping. "Hurry up, Deku," Katsuki barks out, tromping up the trail with a practiced gait. Katsuki has been hiking up mountain trails since before he was 4, although, admittedly, much of the early days were spent being carried by his father. Izuku huffs, hunched over with his hands on his knees. He has no idea how Katsuki manages. His legs are experiencing a painful sensation he would have identified as burning if he had ever been familiar with the very concept outside of a thing that happens to other people, and his stomach is making unpleasant noises that he's pretty sure suggest it's about to rebel against the natural order of things and expel whatever's left of last night's dinner. How much further? He manages to get out in between controlled pants as he tries to smooth his breathing out. The jerk is perfectly fine and not the least bit tired or exhausted by the trek, of course. Standing there like the fact that Izuku is not used to endurance hiking is a personal insult. It's like 5 more fucking minutes, tops. Seriously, you're not fucking failing on me now, are you, Deku? If Izuku didn't know any better, he'd say Katsuki was worried for him. But he does know better, so he thinks it instead. I can make it. He grits out, straightening himself. He takes 5 steps before he's forced to lean on a tree for support. Or maybe you can just bury me here, instead. Katsuki stomps over to him, sliding an arm under and around his shoulder to very impatiently begin half dragging, half helping Izuku up the remaining stretch. Fucking drama queen, he mutters. If you fucking die here, I will blow your body to smithereens and scatter your fucking ashes. There's your fucking burial. Izuku, wisely, says nothing about Katsuki's willingness to help him or about how he thinks Katsuki is the one being dramatic. He says nothing at all, in fact, until they finally reach the peak. There is a single wooden bench present, and Izuku sends his thoughts and prayers to whatever poor soul was tasked with bringing it up this mountain right before he lurches forward to collapse in it, relieved beyond words to finally be off his feet. After dumping the backpack unceremoniously in Izuku's lap, Katsuki slouches into the spot next to him with all the impatience and disdain Izuku has come to expect from just about everything Katsuki does. There. Was that so fucking hard? He snaps, reaching over to open the pack and retrieve a bento. Yes, Izuku says, cashing in on his one free smartass remark per conversation before pulling a bottle of water out and pouring its contents down his throat. He's halfway done with the bottle when he notices Katsuki's eyes on him, and he, very slowly, stops. Katsuki's face is scrunched up in an expression Izuku doesn't recognize, which is strange, because he's seen all of Katsuki's expressions. Angry, frustrated, bloodthirsty, triumphant, hangry, irritated, annoyed, impatient, furious, apoplectic rage. The whole range. Where does the water even go? He mutters, squinting at the bottle in Izuku's hand. How does it even go anywhere? Wouldn't it just turn to steam or some bullshit like that? Is this? No, that wasn't Katsuki's confused face, he knows, because his confused face is the same as his irritated face. Izuku is 90% sure Katsuki experiences confusion the same way that he experiences irritation. I guess it would, Izuku admits, returning to drain the rest of his bottle. If Izuku is being honest, and he always is, he has no idea how his digestive system works outside of the fact that it does. Any further thinking on what that expression could have been is, perhaps fortunately, erased from Izuku's mind because the sun is rising. He takes it back. He completely sees the appeal of this ordeal now because the view from up here is incredible. His eyes drank in every inch of the sight, of the light breaking through the clouds and the first rays screaming across the cityscape of Mizudafu. This mountain has to have been designed by someone because the panorama is too exquisite for Izuku to believe otherwise. Holy shit, he breathes out, so soft and gentle as though he was afraid his words alone would shatter it. Fucking told you. Midoriya Izuku's digestive system is in fact extremely efficient. It has to be, for Izuku's quirk already necessitates that he nearly eat his own weight in food just to keep running. Inko is fortunate that Izuku's dietary requirements are essentially just the word, yes, written in size 32-point font. It means he supplements most of her cooking with scrap metal donated by Hajizan and saves her the misfortune of regularly dealing with the kind of bills normally associated with hosting a 10-person dinner party. Master Wukong, Izuku begins as he balances precariously on one hand, his other arm outstretched for balance as his legs dangle precariously in the air. What makes a good staff? What makes a good staff? I'm not sure I could describe it. I know a good staff when I hold one. Ojiro, if Midoriya is comfortable enough to ask questions, you aren't fighting him hard enough. It's been a year since Izuku first joined the dojo's classes, and many of his initial classmates have either dropped out or moved on. Those remain are under much more serious expectations, and part of that is being put through exercises like sparring with a partner whilst both of you do handstands. Ojiro has a clear advantage over Izuku, as his thick, powerful tail serves as a third limb he can attack with, and it means Izuku is kept on the defensive for the most part. More than an extra way to attack, it also helps him keep his balance and make other attacks that would surely cause him to fall over otherwise. Master Wukong's words only serve to spur him into really abusing that advantage, and Izuku is forced to spring over a low sweep, landing uneasily on his hands. Do you think I could borrow one then? Just to get a feel for it. I'm trying. He folds his legs up against his chest and shifts a palm to balance a little better as one of Ojiro's legs scythes through the space they were just occupying. To make my own, He unfolds one leg into a snap kick, but Ojiro's tail swats it to the side, forcing him into an unfavorable turn. But I figured there was more to a good staff than just being a long stick. Ojiro's tail sweeps along like a literal broom, and Izuku can't dodge fast enough to avoid being cleaned up with the dust. Huh, looks like I just made a clean sweep. Weapon training, for those who wish to opt in, will begin next year, Midoriya, but I suppose there's no harm in letting you get a feel for one now. Master Wukong peers down at him as he takes a moment to regain his breath on the surprisingly comfortable floor mats. 12 minutes that time, you're improving. Excellent quip, Ojiro, but you still need to work on the delivery. And then Wukong is gone, off to supervise and commentate on a different pair. You know, I still think you'd probably do better if you weren't always distracted, Ojiro says as he helps him up with a friendly hand. Izuku shrugs, dusting himself off a little. Probably, he admits, but I can't help it, Ojiro-senpai. He stretches his arms out above his head and glances at the clock. 5 minutes left before the training session's out. Not really enough time to get another spar in. If I stopped thinking, I'm pretty sure I'd die. Ojiro snorts, adjusting his GI a little. I think if you stopped thinking, Midoriya, it would be because you were already dead. Izuku tilts his head to the side for a moment, pondering the thought. I should get that engraved on my tombstone. He mutters with such complete seriousness and conviction that Ojiro isn't sure if he's joking or not. He decides to laugh a little anyway, although it's tinged with the sort of awkward nervousness that these little laughs tend to have. Izuku chalks it up as a victory regardless. Today, a nervous titter. Tomorrow, a sensible chuckle. The future, side-splitting laughter followed by a leg sweep. A good staff, it seems to Izuku's untrained hands, should be just a little heavier on the ends than the middle. It's more about the balance than the weight itself, Wukong explains. If you can swing it around for hours without tiring, then it's a decent weight for you. Wukong's own staff is so heavy Izuku can't imagine swinging it for more than 10 minutes. Izuku learns that electricity, much like fire, has no appreciable effect on his body beyond a vague sense of tingling. He thinks this is not too surprising, given that electricity and fire are quite similar in many ways, but it is no less heart-stopping for Midoriya Inko to walk into the garage after hearing several loud crackling noises only to find her son holding a pair of jumper cables attached to a car battery. Despite her best efforts, she can only wrangle a vague promise out of him to seek adult supervision the next time he tries something like this. In her heart, she knows it will be useless. This discovery proves eminently useful to the fledgling inventor, though, and he begins experimenting with electronics to a worrying degree. He doesn't have access to the equipment or tools that would really let him go wild with circuits and wires, and this fact is a great relief to both Inko and the faculty of Kuriyama Junior High alike. But he still finds in himself the designs for particularly simple self-defense devices, such as a small wire frame he takes to wearing under his shirt, connected to a small array of batteries kept in a pack against the small of his back. The circuit is only completed when his left thumb touches his left pinky finger and delivers a payload equal to most commercial-grade tasers. Although Izuku has to remember not to grab anything conductive with his left hand. Surprisingly, he manages to avoid electrocuting anyone by accident. The principal's office is full of knick-knacks, ranging from a Newton's cradle to an assortment of motivational posters that don't really motivate. Kodama Sensei is a serious-looking middle-aged woman who seemed like she would be much more at home in an office building giving a presentation on sales figures and managing a cubicle farm than she does overseeing the education of teenagers. Midoriya, please take a seat. Her gaze flicks up from the papers, she's shuffling only briefly to acknowledge his presence. Izuku does as she asks, slipping into the touch-to-low chair and reaching out to take up a pair of the puzzle toys she keeps on her desk to fiddle with. She's still shuffling papers, but her attention is decidedly more on Izuku now. Now, Midoriya, do you understand why we're having this meeting? He blinks owlishly at her, slow and deliberate. No, he genuinely can't remember the purpose of this meeting. He's sure he was aware of it at some stage, but whatever it was, his mind has discarded it. Idly, he feels one of the puzzle rings come loose. Kodama Sensei purses her lips, but continues searching her papers for something. Do you remember the lab report you handed in for physics last Tuesday? She seems to find what she's looking for, because she pulls a familiar sheaf of papers stapled together at the top left corner in a plastic sheet. Izuku can just glimpse the cover page. The Physics of Optics Midoriya Izuku, Class 2B. Tilting his head to the side, Izuku mulls it over. He vaguely remembers it. He wasn't really concentrating that hard in class, though, and most of what he did on autopilot with Katsuki. Did I do something wrong? He says, although his tone is decidedly lackadaisical and not all matching with the atmosphere. Another puzzle ring comes loose from the first toy, and he manages to get two free of the second one. He knows Kodama Sensei is extra serious because she plucks her horn-rimmed glasses off her face and stares at him with her slit pupils. Midoriya, she says in the tone of someone who is trying to convey how calm they are without giving away the fact that they very much panicking in slow motion. This is a schematic. Izuku stares blankly at her. Oops, he offers. He must have accidentally drawn the designs he was thinking of in class instead of the report. He's usually pretty good at catching himself when he does that, but it does mean he has restarted several assignments. The second puzzle toy is easier than the first, and he soon has a ring dangling on each finger. He spares it a glance, before fiddling with the first some more. Midoriya, this is a schematic for a laser rifle. Oh, her voice is doing that thing where she wants to raise it, but also refuses to, and it sort of ends up sounding like the feeling of being pushed up against a chain-link fence. It is solar-powered. Kaken and I watched the sunrise the week before, he offers as explanation. Oh, the first puzzle toy is finished. Kodama Sensei closes her eyes for a moment and becomes much calmer as she opens them again. Midoriya, whilst this schematic is very impressive and Erudica Sensei has opted to give you full marks for what is, ultimately, a demonstration that you fully understand the current unit of the class, schematics of solar-powered weapons are not acceptable classwork at Kurama Junior High. She pauses for a moment before realizing that this is Midoriya Izuku she's talking to and adds schematics of any weapon, irrespective of power source, are not acceptable classwork at Kurama Junior High. Oh, says Izuku in a way that suggests he only half understands what she's saying. Admittedly, he's only half paying attention. The other half is divided between thinking about that solar-powered laser rifle and playing with the puzzle rings. She gives him a long, piercing look. Midoriya, this is the second time you've done something like this. Last unit, instead of submitting a circuit diagram, you submitted this. She pulls a second sheet of paper out, revealing a large and intricate diagram that Izuku can only barely remember doodling. Did I make a mistake? Midoriya, this is a satellite radio receiver. It is explicitly capable of being built by recycled parts. Erudica Sensei built it using an old microwave. It is in the staff room, playing classical music at this very moment. Do you understand what any of that means, Midoriya? Kodama Sensei is beginning to sound defeated, but she still finds it within herself to stare long and hard at Izuku. Izuku stares back, but mostly because he's not sure how he's supposed to be reacting to this. Eventually, she sighs in complete and utter defeat. Izuku isn't sure what he actually won, but he sure did beat her, it seems. It means you are absolutely beyond the scope of Erudica Sensei's teaching. She has suggested, and I agreed, that in place of future physics classes, you will simply be allowed a free period to use as you see fit. He tilts his head to the side for a brief moment. Can I go? He asks, already diverting much more attention to the rifle. Kodama Sensei, likewise, returns to shuffling paperwork and ignoring Izuku's existence. Yes, you may go, Midoriya. It's only after Izuku is gone that Kodama Sensei realizes that what had begun as two separate sets of differently linked puzzle rings has become one single linked set. She spends an hour attempting to separate them, before deciding that this is their fate now, and she is just going to pretend they were meant to be like that. 1 month later, Kodama Sensei signs off on the creation of the Invention Club. Its sole member is Midoriya Izuku, and it gives an increased base for which he can request access to various school resources and facilities, including both the labs and the workshops. It is soon nicknamed the Midoriya Izuku Containment Club by Izuku's peers. The teachers do not correct this, though Bakugo Katsuki only snorts in derision at the very idea of the name. as though any traditional social convention could possibly hope to contain Midoriya Izuku. Midoriya Izuku dreams of stars, great, bright, and burning, swirling giants of gas and light. He sees the galaxies, sees the universe unfold in such awful clarity that it rings in his ears. He sees every atom, every molecule and particle, every quark and gluon, and it is all so terribly beautiful that his soul seems to sing in harmony with the stars. Izuku? A voice cuts through the music of the stars, and when Izuku blinks, he's standing on the balcony of his home, dressed in only his nightclothes, the worried face of Midoriya Inko dominating his vision. Izuku, you were sleepwalking, she explains, seeming less worried now that Izuku is back on Earth, as much as he ever is, at least, but this brief respite is washed away with fresh concern. Izuku, you're crying, she says, so soft and gentle that her words feel like a balm on his skin. Am I? Izuku asks, distinctly unsure. His fingers come away wet when he wipes his cheek, and he glances down at his hands. Huh? Are you okay? Was it a bad dream? He can only stare at his fingers, calloused from work, tears still slowly dripping. I don't know, he mumbles, looking back at his mother's face. I can't remember what it was. When he lets his mind drift untethered, he could almost swear he hears a faint music in the back of his mind. He can never shake the impression that something about it is important, but he can't remember what it is. Despite the multitude of peculiar habits and strange things that Izuku does, very few of the student body of Kurama Junior High attempt to bully him, and of those few that made attempts, none pursue it anymore. This is partly because Midoriya Izuku is simply not very rewarding to bully. A group of upperclassmen delinquents attempted to shake him down for money once Izuku asked them for a loan because he only had marbles in his pockets, and partly because the entirety of the student body of Kurama Junior High has seen the predicament of Bakugo Katsuki and very wisely decided that they would like to avoid being trapped in Izuku's personal gravity. Of course, this doesn't stop people who have had no exposure to Mizutofu's own local cryptid from attempting to antagonize him the way they would any other resident. The mugger is tall and sort of lumpy, with hands a little too large for their body. The baggy clothing doesn't give much else away, and the shirt, Izuku thinks it's a shirt, worn as a makeshift mask doesn't help. Give me your money. Give me all your fucking money. They bluster, jabbing a serrated combat knife at Izuku. He tilts his head to the side, inspecting the finish on the knife for a brief moment. It's positively filthy with grime. Lips pursed together in disapproval, he reaches into a pocket and withdraws a microfiber cloth. You should take better care of this, he says idly, reaching up to wrap the cloth around the blade. It's a waste of a very nice knife to let it get so dirty. Didn't you fucking hear me? The mugger barks, slapping Izuku's hand away. The cloth flutters to the ground, and Izuku frowns as he goes to pick it back up. I said your money. Fucking give me your money, or I swear to God, I will stab you. Right, Izuku mutters, only half paying attention. The cloth is a little dusty, but still quite usable, and he stuffs it back into his pocket. Can I borrow a pen? The knife is pressing up against Izuku's chest now, and he's pretty sure the mugger's eyes are about to bulge out of their sockets. Give me the goddamn fucking money. They scream, spittle flying out of the slit cut in the shirt for their mouth. Izuku scratches his cheek with a crooked finger, frowning a little harder. I'm trying. I don't have any cash on me, so unless you have a card reader, I can only give you a check. The mugger is still for a second, and then they let out a wordless cry of frustrated rage. Instead of just pushing the knife forward, they pull it back to really thrust it at Izuku, the mark of an enthusiastic but amateur fighter. He has a moment to think that this is extremely rude of the mugger before a gauntlet-clad fist slams into the side of their head. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Izuku blinks, looking up at a white helmet that reminds him vaguely of the old Kamen Rider show that sometimes played on Saturday mornings. Or maybe more like a mecha anime. White armor, blue highlights. Ah, he says blankly, you're the turbo hero, Ingenium. Izuku gets the impression that Ingenium is puffing out his chest at that, but it's hard to tell with the armor. The way he puts his hands on his hips is very suggestive of it, though. That's right. He says, I happened to be patrolling in the area, and I saw you needed help. Oh, does that mean you have a pen I can borrow? A pen? Ingenium echoes, sounding confused. Izuku doesn't know what there is to be confused about. He said he was here to help, right? Oh, an autograph. Sure. Ingenium withdraws a pen and a folded-up sheet of paper from a very sensible compartment on his hip. Who should I make it out to? Izuku stares at Ingenium, faintly confused for a moment before he glances at the downed mugger, who is in no state to respond to anything, before shrugging. Make it out to my biggest fan. That way it will sell better on eBay. Ingenium freezes up for a moment, but shrugs slightly. Despite the incredibly blunt and nonchalant request, and regardless of the purpose, he's never one to refuse an autograph. Not only would it reflect badly on him, as a pro hero, but he strongly believes in the community outreach aspect of heroics. In short order, he scrawls his signature on the paper, but he can't help but dedicate it to my biggest and most honest fan before he hands it back to Izuku. Thank you, says Izuku and proceeds to very calmly fold it up before reaching down to tuck it into the downed mugger's belt. If Ingenium had any idea how to react before, it has completely slipped his mind entirely as he watches the incredibly strange teenager begin to calmly walk away like this was just another routine moment of his life. The sound of wood striking flesh fills the air of the dojo as various students try their hands at various monkey-approved weapons. Nunchaku, tunfas, wooden batons called tonkat, and of course staves. The addition of a staff to Izuku's repertoire significantly changes how he fights, but he feels that it sort of evens out the advantage Ojiro gained from his tail. Sort of, because Ojiro is still much more agile and skilled than he is, but the additional range granted by the staff means Izuku can keep him at a distance. Come on, Midoriya, Ojiro calls, dodging a flurry of rapid jabs. You're going to have to do more than play keep away to win. Izuku thinks that playing keep away is about as much as he can manage against Ojiro. I'm just trying to stave off the inevitable. His eyes light up as Ojiro snorts, and he darts forward to lash out in this brief opening. Ojiro spins out of the way without even trying, and his thick, powerful tail collides with Izuku's stomach. A nice attempt, he begins, grinning down at his downed partner, but I'll have to curtail it. Izuku frowns from his position on his back. I'm not sure that's what curtail means. Midoriya, there are only so many tail puns to be made. He ponders it for a moment and concedes the point. He rises up to his feet again, dusting himself off and resuming his initial ready stance. Ojiro is polite enough to wait for his junior to make the first move, and Izuku goes for a loose sweep at his legs too, predictably. No avail. Ojiro-senpai, you're entering high school next year as well, right? That's the plan. Ojiro isn't distracted at all by answering Izuku's questions, partly because Master Wukong insists that all of his students learn how to banter whilst they fight. Multitasking is at the heart of his lessons, and it's a valuable skill for any fighter to have. I'll probably have to drop out of the dojo, unfortunately, depending on where I end up. Izuku ducks under a roundhouse kick and flicks the tip of the staff up at where Ojiro was a millisecond ago. Are you aiming for U.A? Of course. It's more hoping than aiming, though. He bats Izuku's staff away before he crouches low to the ground. That's all the warning Izuku gets before Ojiro's tail thumps against the ground and launches him at Izuku like a cannonball. Izuku manages to brace himself enough that he's not immediately bowled over, but a second thump from the tail sends him to the ground. Wait, I had something for this. Ojiro's face scrunches up for a few moments before he gives up trying to remember it. Why did you ask, by the way? Thinking of applying as well? He gets up off of Izuku to help him to his feet with a friendly hand. A friend's aiming to get in as well, Izuku says lightly. I haven't really thought about what high school I'm applying for yet. Ojiro frowns at him. You really should be thinking more about this kind of thing, says the unwitting soul who has only ever interacted with Izuku on a surface level. Still, he can't say Ojiro's wrong. That's why I'm asking. I need to make a decision soon. Are you going to aim for U.A as well, then? Ojiro asks, uncharacteristically going on the offense. His hands are a flurry of jabs, strikes, and thrusts, and Izuku decides that the best defense against the stream of attacks is to just not be there, leaping back to create some distance. Izuku has to think about it for a moment. I have a scholarship, so I guess, he says, as nonchalant as he is noncommittal. It catches Ojiro off guard, even though it was only intended as an honest, straightforward answer, and Izuku sweeps his feet out with the staff. He points one end of his staff directly at Ojiro's head in a clear display of triumph. Although Izuku's expression is not of victorious triumph, but mild confusion. Are you feeling okay, Ojiro-senpai? An attack of that caliber shouldn't have succeeded. Izuku, Ojiro says quietly, only vaguely aware of how faint his voice is. How easy do you think getting into Udare is? Ojiro is asking because Midoriya can be airy and distant in his thinking, but Ojiro's certain he's also one of the best students in the dojo. Or at least, he would be if he was capable of emptying his mind and focusing on the fight. I'm not sure, Izuku admits as he steps away from Ojiro, and for once, is able to return the favor and help him up. Eridika Sensei put the application in for me earlier this year, and apparently it was approved. I still have to pass the entrance exams though. Ojiro is staring at him in a familiar way. It's the stare of someone who is under the dawning realization that the old family heirloom was secretly a priceless treasure and that their grandfather was not, in fact, a dashing archaeologist, but instead an intrepid tomb raider. Izuku tilts his head, faintly confused. Was it something he said? Yeah, go for I think. Can't hurt to try, right? Ojiro's lips forms the words. His tongue utters them, and they are in his voice, but he doesn't feel like they are his. At the end of their final year of junior high, Katsuki insists on taking Izuku out to the local mall to buy him a new set of tools for Christmas. Izuku's not entirely sure they need to go to all the effort, but Katsuki has always been very insistent on dragging him to various things or events outside of his normal routine, and, quite unfairly if you ask Izuku, his mother completely supports him in these attempts. Izuku has never been to the mall. His shopping experience extends to the local hardware store, the local convenience stores, the one near his house, and the one near his school, and the local supermarket. The mall, in its vast and terrible glory, has so far avoided joining that list not by any deliberate choice on Izuku's part, but simply because he never really saw the need. The experience is very alien to one who has managed to avoid it for 14 years. There are so many people here, Izuku mutters, with the carefully quiet voice of someone who is afraid that if they attract any attention, it will notice them. Why are there so many people? You didn't tell me there'd be this many people. Katsuki glances at him, a flash of irritation on his face. It's Christmas, Deku, he grumbles as they step onto the escalator. Of course there are fucking crowds. Bunch of assholes forgot to buy Christmas presents and left it to the last minute. Hesitant at first to step onto the escalator, but far more unwilling to be left behind by Katsuki, Izuku is sure he will be swallowed by the crowds. He hurriedly follows him, reaching out to hold onto the sleeve of his shirt to keep him close. I'm not fucking holding your hand, Deku, Katsuki snaps offhandedly, although he also doesn't break Izuku's grip. Izuku is too busy staring at everything around him to comment. As the escalator rises, he can only see more people flowing around each other like streams. A part of him is amazed at the fluidity of it all, but it's smothered by a growing sense of nervousness at the idea of being surrounded by so many people. He starts to hum, low and quiet, and the harmony of it is a balm for his nerves. Katsuki has his hands stuffed in his pockets and a particularly aggressive scowl, but not even his usual air of barely restrained violence is enough to make the Christmas crowds part like the Red Sea. At best, it creates a barely perceptible bubble of space around the two of them, but Izuku is all too willing to cling closer to stretch that bubble as far as it will go when they start to head into the main section, where the pressure of the deep sea of shoppers is even harder to bear. Deku, he warns, you are really fucking close right now. What the fuck is your problem? Izuku responds by graduating from holding onto his sleeve to a vice-like grip on his arm. He can't hear his own voice attempting to harmonize. He's being crushed by the pressure. There are too many people, too many things, too much, he needs space, can't breathe, he can't breathe, he can't breathe. HENEDSSPACE. The lack of verbal response is not unusual, but combined with how crushing his grip is on his arm, Katsuki is forced to consider that maybe something has rattled Izuku. It's a theory that gains traction rather quickly because Izuku's face is pale and sweaty, and he is definitely hyperventilating. This was not the friendly bonding activity Katsuki had envisioned. He's not entirely sure on how to handle this. It's a panic attack, he thinks. He's pretty sure at least. He was prepared for a lot of eventualities and possible ways this could have gone, but Deku has a panic attack was very much removed from the list of possibilities because up until this point, Katsuki was not sure Izuku was even capable of experiencing panic. He'd expected things like having to drag Izuku away from particularly interesting things or from eating something ridiculous. Still, Katsuki is nothing if not decisive in a moment of crisis, and he seizes Izuku's wrist in his hand and plows through the crowd towards the restrooms. Public toilets, even in a crowded mall during Christmas, are like deserted islands in the sea of shoppers. His endeavor is easily assisted by amping his aggressive scowl up several notches, and for those who either don't react or don't notice, Bakugo Katsuki has mastered the art of elbowing people out of his goddamn way. He generally has no concern for how this makes other people feel, but the sentiment is doubled in this particular situation. He barges into the male toilets with a still hyperventilating Izuku in tow. A middle-aged man is busy washing his hands and turns to look at what caused the disturbance only to be greeted with a glare powered by all of Katsuki's considerable aggression. Wisely, the man leaves in a hurry, hands still dripping. Katsuki wants to believe that Izuku will snap back to his normal self if he's just given a little time and space, but no part of him is willing to risk it. He racks his brain, trying to remember what people did on dramas or TV shows when someone was panicking. All right, I'll fucking write. Deku, count to 10. Breathe in, count to 10. Breathe out, count to 10. He's pretty sure there's counting of some kind involved in this. It seems to be working somewhat, as at the very least Izuku is no longer hyperventilating. Against his better judgment, he lifts Izuku's chin to make eye contact. Eye contact has always been a bit dangerous when Izuku is acting oddly. The phrase, "lost in your eyes," is never so real any other time. His eyes are wide and unfocused, far more than their usual degree. The green-gold corona flickered through his iris seems to glow with an inner light, and Katsuki can feel the familiar sensation of pulling like someone is taking his hand and saying, "I have so many things to show you." And there is just the faintest sound of singing, but he has had 14 years of exposure to everything about Izuku, and he keeps his focus. Izuku's pupils are slowly dilating, and if Katsuki were a poet, he would liken it to a black hole devouring the light. Instead, all he can think is that it's probably not a good sign. Worse, it's getting harder and harder to focus. The pull is getting more powerful, more insistent the longer he looks, but as tempting as the idea of quite literally losing himself in Izuku's eyes. He knows if he lets himself go, he'll never find his way back. He's going to have to take drastic measures. He's going to have to do something he would never do otherwise. Izuku, he says, and although they've known each other for nearly their entire lives, Izuku's actual name sits uneasy on his tongue. It just feels wrong on some fundamental level. It has the desired effect, though, because almost immediately Izuku snaps back to reality, or at least as close to reality as he gets, and frowns at him as though he weren't just hyperventilating and lost in his own mind. Katsuki wonders if Izuku loses himself in his mind the same way he threatens to be lost in his eyes, but he'll never truly know. "Did you just call me by my actual name?" he says, because of course that's what he'd focus on. "Deku," Katsuki begins, "are you okay?" Izuku blinks. Thoughts of the crushing sensation, of the need to breathe, of the pressure and the lack of space still circling his mind like vultures waiting for him to break down. "No," he says in a tone that is entirely too calm. "I think I'd like to go now." It is the most direct and logical expression of his feelings and thoughts that Katsuki has ever heard, which only serves to alarm him just that much more. "All right," Katsuki mutters, mentally planning their route out. The fastest and most direct method will involve powering through the crowd again. So in a complete violation of his previous words, he takes Izuku's hand in his own with a secure grip. "When you're ready." Izuku does not panic on the way out, although he does make a mental note to never step foot in the mall again. Later, Katsuki drops off a wrapped set of tools and stares at his face for far too long until Izuku insists that he's perfectly fine now. "Izuku, it's time to wake up. Katsuki is already waiting for you downstairs." Izuku peels himself off of his bed, groggily searching for the alarm clock that was supposed to be on his nightstand. Why hadn't it woken him up? It was supposed to, oh, right. He'd disassembled it 2 days ago. The parts were still in his workshop, and he was supposed to have reassembled the new and improved version yesterday. But he'd ended up getting distracted by an opportunity to glimpse a supernova through his telescope. The rest of his day had been spent scribbling ideas down, half-formed designs and plans for a variety of things. Coming. He calls back to his mother, and Katsuki as well, he supposes, before shuffling very slowly towards his dresser. He picks out a clean uniform, lays it out on his bed, and goes to take a shower. The steaming hot water cascading down is enough to boil a potato, but Izuku only feels refreshed and chipper. A hot shower never fails to wake him up in the mornings. Although maybe he could boil an egg in the shower whilst he's there, cook breakfast and get refreshed. It's an idea that holds some merit, but how long does it even take to boil an egg? He's not actually sure. Izuku, hurry up or you'll be late. Izuku blinks, snapped out of the haze of calculations and thoughts. He's already drawn half a design for a shower-friendly egg holder using the fogged-up bathroom mirror. Right. No time for designs. Coming, Mom. He calls back, reaching over to turn the shower off and grab a towel. When Izuku finally comes down the stairs, Gakurin's still unbuttoned. There's a small smorgasbord of food available. Grilled fish, vegetables, pickled and fresh, miso soup, fried tofu, rice, all laid out in bowls waiting for him, although Katsuki has helped himself to more than a small helping of rice and fish. Presumably, he ate breakfast at home, but got badgered into eating here as well by Inko, not that it would take much convincing. He wastes no time in joining Katsuki, greeting him only with a curt kaken, before he starts to shovel food into his face. Katsuki responds to this by striking him on the top of the head and glaring. At least say good morning to Inka-san, Deku. He snaps, glaring at him heatedly. Inko titters gently as she sweeps in to refill Katsuki's cup of tea. Katsuki-kun, there's no need to get offended on my behalf, she says, genuinely touched at his concern, and I told you to call me Auntie. Katsuki nods politely. Yes, Auntie. It is the most respect Katsuki shows practically anyone, and when Izuku had asked him why, he had only given him this blank look and said, she's your mother. Izuku isn't sure what's special about his mother in particular when he knows Katsuki would never be this polite to his own. Further musing is predictably cut short when Katsuki starts to get impatient and shoves his backpack at him. Come on, you can eat on the way, he snaps. If I'm late because I chose to stick around for your stupid ass, I will annihilate you. Geez, I'm coming, Kaken. Hold on, is what Izuku wants to say, but his mouth is full of pickled vegetables, so nothing so eloquent comes out. Inko, for her part, just waves to both of them with a beatific smile. Good luck, Katsuki-kun. Don't cause too much trouble, Izuku. Thanks for the food, Auntie, Katsuki calls back. Sometimes, Izuku thinks he will never understand why Katsuki does the things he does. What do you think the exam will be like, Kaken? Is Izuku's first words after he's done eating the food he carried with him. It's a heroics course, so what would they even test for? Do you think they have dummies tied up over a fire and you have to swing in and save them? Katsuki doesn't even glance at him, too busy keeping his hands in his pockets and glaring at anyone that gets too close. Deku, even for you, that is ridiculously fucking stupid. Izuku puffs out his cheeks sulkily. Well, how would you test for heroism then? Is what he asks, but he already knows the general answer. Fighting, of course, idiot. Izuku mentally declares himself the winner of Bakuga Bingo. Katsuki huffs, elbowing him sharply. Wipe that dumb smile off your face, Deku. I know you're fucking laughing at me. He doesn't deny it, and Katsuki can't tell if that is more or less irritating. Stupid fucking Deku. Kaken, you should stop being so aggressive. Heroism is more than beating up acceptable targets, Izuku says cheerfully, completely ignorant of the uncovered manhole in his path. Unless you want to be like Endeavor. Second in ranking, not even in the top 50 for popularity. I know that, asshole, Katsuki grumbles, idly reaching out to jerk Izuku to the side. But how fuck are you meant to test rescuing? For his part, being jerked to the side doesn't even disrupt Izuku's gait. With dummies, of course, Kaken. Yeah, but you'd have to create a dangerous situation to rescue the dummies from, and there is no fucking way you would allow some fuckwit to get seriously injured for the sake of a fucking exam. Izuku ponders it for a moment, before conceding the point. Teachers or robots? He asks, moving on to what he considers the next obvious question. It only takes half a minute for Katsuki to figure out what Izuku is actually asking. Why the fuck would it be robots? It's probably other examinees. That's silly Kakin. That only proves who's better, not who's good enough plus injuries. It has to be either teachers or robots, Izuku declares, nodding to himself. Humph, teachers then. If it was robots, the repair bill would be fucking ridiculous. Izuku tilts his head to the side. U.A is really something though. I think they could afford robots. It's not about if they can, it's about why they would, Katsuki mutters. I realize that you've never thought about that difference, but just fucking try. For once. Izuku stares at him, and Katsuki knows that he fundamentally does not understand the concept of being able to afford robots, but choosing not to use them. It's just as well that Izuku is not a very good coder despite his many talents, or the Midoriya household would have achieved sentience. Their debate over how U.A would test the applicant's fighting ability is cut short when the sight of the towering gates comes into view. Wow, photos don't do it justice, do they? Izuku whispers, awestruck. Katsuki is similarly awed, but for much less time. Right, I'm heading for the practical exam. You head off wherever the fuck the support exam is, and we'll meet up here after the written exam. He pauses, and then seizes him by the shoulder. Repeat it back to me, Deku. Meet up here after the written exam, Izuku says breezily. It'll be fine, Kakin. Deku, if you were to get fucking lost again, I would never be able to face Annie. I'm not allowed to attach a GPS to your thick skull, so this will have to fucking do. He finishes by slapping Izuku on the back in an uncharacteristic display of friendship. See you in a few hours. If I don't, I will hunt you down and drag you back home after I beat your dumb inconsiderate ass for making Annie worry. Izuku privately thinks it's Katsuki is the one who would be worrying. Fine, fine. I have my phone on me anyway. Katsuki wordlessly hands him a familiar black smartphone accompanied by a look. Okay, I have it now, and I promise I won't lose it. Katsuki stares at him long and hard before slapping him on the back of the head and stalking off silently. Izuku watches him go in equal silence, rubbing the back of his head ruefully. Just as he's about to leave for his own exam, a voice calls out you, and purely out of habit, Izuku turns around. The faintly familiar figure of Shinso Hitoshi is pointing incredulously at him. Me, Izuku responds, grinning exuberantly. The power of the friendship bracelet is undeniable by time, space, or fate. Shinso Hitoshi has not forgotten the all-too vivid memory of the boy who chews sand, but he has, for many days and nights, questioned the veracity of the event. He had no name to call him, and any he related the story to, save his parents who he secretly believed merely wanted to spare his feelings, laughed in his face, as though the concept of a spirit who chewed sand into glass was too ridiculous in a world where people flew or fired lasers from body parts. Hitoshi clung to the truth, though, clung to the bracelet they claimed he just found on the beach and came up with a tall tale around, as though Hitoshi had ever done so before, as though Hitoshi had ever been so bravely gregarious. And now he was staring right at the boy who chews sand and spits baubles, and he has no idea whether to be happy to meet him again or angry that he just showed up once and left. It's hard to be angry, he thinks, and all the fantasies of asking him what the fuck his deal was fade to the back of his mind, because the boy who chews sand is so bright it's almost like looking at the sun, all ecstatic grin and freckled skin. His eyes are the worst, though, coronas of green gold circling an endless void that's almost beckoning him in. He takes it back. He's not the sun, but a galaxy condensed into the form of a small teenager, 1,000 glimmering stars all at once. Are you okay? You seem kind of out of it. Low blood sugar? Hitoshi snaps back to reality hard enough that he recoils slightly. No. Thank you. He pauses, before jolting as though shocked. You. What's your name? If he doesn't ask now, he'll forget, and he'll have to wait another 3 years, or whatever blue moon red sun stars aligning mumbo-jumbo is necessary for their paths to cross again. The boy who might be a galaxy points to himself. I'm Izuku. Midoriya Izuku. Shinso Hitoshi repeats the name to himself mentally. It's less awe-inspiring than he imagined, but the weight of it still warms him to the bone. I'm Hitoshi. Shinso Hitoshi. Great to see you again, Hitoshi, Izuku says cheerfully. Hitoshi is a little bowled over by Izuku's blatantly familiar use of his first name on top of his, well, everything, but he manages to keep his wits. You're here. At UA. Of course he is, Hitoshi thinks. He's so incredibly warm, he has no trouble at all imagining Izuku as a hero. Yup. Are you taking the practical exam as well? Hitoshi nods quietly. Why, yeah. Just. Gonna give it my all. The words puncture his mood and deflate it flat. Izuku doesn't know his quirk. Izuku, so bright and warm, has chosen to be his friend, but the bitter reminder of what he is will one day be a pill too much to swallow, and then Izuku will leave like all the others. Blissfully misjudging why Hitoshi seemed down, Izuku pats him on the shoulder in an attempt to cheer him up. Come on, you'll do great. If you ever find yourself wondering what to do, just think, how can I help people who need it? If you do that, I'm sure you'll pass. That's what being a hero is all about. Hitoshi wants to believe it's that easy. Izuku checks his watch and pats him on the shoulder one more. Great seeing you again. I'll catch you around. And then he's off in a direction that does not lead to the practical exam at all. Belatedly, Hitoshi realizes he didn't so much as get his email address. Hitoshi stares down the gargantuan zero-pointer, and he feels the last dregs of any hope of passing fate. It just had to be robots. He only managed to score one measly point. His eyes linger on the prone form of a girl he doesn't recognize, and he can see the massive tread hovering just above her like Damocles' mallet. How can I help people who need it? Hitoshi grits his teeth, glass beads warm against his skin. It's against the rules, but nobody else is going to help her, and he's the only one. He might never be a hero to the masses, but he can be a hero to just this one girl. If he can help just one person with his quirk. Oi! He shouts at another student. You want to be a hero, right? Ida Tinya turns to answer just before he takes off again, but the moment the words of course leave his mouth, his body is no longer his to command. Then save her. As he slowly paced down the corridor to the classroom the support exams were held, the first thing Izuku noticed was the noise. Rambunctious shouting interspersed with bouts of what could only rightly be described as maniacal cackling served to create an atmosphere that was equal parts disturbing and intriguing. Nobody had ever accused Izuku of having a self-preservation instinct worth a damn though, so he curiously stuck his head in through the door. A girl with thick pink locks was hunched over a desk where she was cranking a spanner on something large and metal and loudly declaring that her baby was going to blow the competition out of the water whilst the rest of the examinees looked on in a mix of apprehension, terror, and intrigue. Next to her was an exasperated-looking girl who had her desk pushed to the side, an array of tools laid out before her. Every now and then, at the pink-haired girl's loud, boisterous prompting, she would pick up a tool with her left hand where it would momentarily, and strangely, sort of stutter visually, much like an image from a bad TV signal, before reappearing in her right hand with a similar visual effect. At this point, the laughing girl would seize it and use it on whatever it was she was tinkering with. Spying an open seat next to the still tinkering girl, Izuku casually strode in and set his bag down on it and took a seat. The laughing girl was too busy working on whatever project she had to notice Izuku's presence, and the rest of the group seemed to be giving her too much of a berth to really react. He's mostly curious as to what she's working on. It looks like some kind of cannon or launcher, although Izuku can't see what it launches. The Tinkerer finally notices Izuku's presence, so boldly close as it is, and her oddly cross-haired eyes light up. Ah, another minion. Here, hold this. She thrusts a canister at him that he idly notes is the perfect size and shape to be ammunition for the launcher. Ever helpful, Izuku obediently obliges. The girl across on the other side just shoots him the look usually reserved for the use of people trapped under 10 tons of steel begging to be freed. Izuku just beams back at her, and any hope of release dies. Now, my lovely minions, behold what you have helped wrought. Rejoice, for you have participated in the creation of the Netmaster 6000. Tinkerer holds the newly christened Netmaster 6000 above her head, as though she expects a shaft of light to burst through the roof, and deliver a heavenly blessing. Izuku claps softly in appreciation, although nobody else does, which he thinks is a little rude. Why 6,000? He asks. The Tinkerer basks in his adulation for a moment before snapping her focus onto him, like some sort of attention-seeking missile. Simple answer, minion. It's a slimmed-down version of the Netmaster 9000, of course, but it's software upgradable. Izuku nods sagely. Makes perfect sense to him. The Tinkerer grins at him, full of exuberance and energy, and there's almost an audible click as Izuku beams back. Finally, someone who appreciates a good high-velocity net launcher. It is a very good one, Izuku says amicably, examining the canister, especially the propulsion. Gas-powered? The Tinkerer is absolutely delighted. Hydrogen-based, yes. Electric signal. For ignition? But the exhaust bleeds right out the sides with. Oh, is that? Copper dimetitium dampeners, yes. The tool girl groans quietly, head thumping against her desk. Buddha save us all because God is clearly dead. There's 2 of them. I should have applied for Gen Ed. I should have known there would be more than one, and they'd all apply for UA. Someone wrap me in foil and stick me in the fridge because this turkey is roasted. She is, unfortunately, the only person who grasps the importance of this moment. Everyone else is just sensibly afraid, but without any of the dread the situation deserves. Izuku and the Tinkerer are too busy firing off rapid half-sentences to even remember why they were even at this room. But if you use titanium tristanite instead. For the frame? Reduce the weight, but without sacri. Integrity and it'll. Look fucking boss. The Tinkerer throws her head back and cackles, hands held up in the air. Izuku isn't sure what's so funny, but he's definitely in a joyous mood himself. The side door slammed open suddenly, startling everyone in the room before a short, recognizable figure tromped in. With his hefty metal mask/helmet, thick claw-tipped gloves and bare chest, anyone would recognize the pro hero, Power Loader. Looks like everyone made it on time, he says, as he takes his place at the front of the classroom. I'm gonna assume everyone read the instruction pamphlet, because if you didn't, then you've already failed and you may as well leave now. He pauses for a brief moment just to see if anyone actually did just fail then and there before continuing. Good. This is the support exam, as you all already know. If you didn't know, then you should probably hurry along to wherever it is that you are supposed to be, or stick around. I don't actually care. He paused again, scratching the side of his mask like it was his face. Anyway, the support department is the most stringent and selective department in U.A. We're tougher than even the heroics department, and we're sure as hell tougher than general education and management. He slammed his fists together with a loud clank for emphasis, striking a suitably dramatic pose with his left hand pointing at the class. Why? Because we are the support, the backbone, the people who make sure Endeavor doesn't become a streaker with fireproof clothing. That is why we're the hardest and toughest department. That and budget limitations, a new voice interjects, as a woman sticks her head in from the side area. Her hair, done up in a messy but officious-looking bun, is a smooth, cool blue color, but Izuku can see the way it is slowly turning green from the roots up. Her casual, office lady hair and glasses are offset by the bright orange overalls stained with grease and other fluids she's wearing. Power Loader nods seriously, surprisingly easily too, considering his mask. Yes, budget limitations are very important in the support department. You too will learn of their power, provided you make it in. Now, onto the actual exam. I'll call out your names, and you'll come into the side room to present your device or design to be judged by a panel. Then you will leave and receive your results within 3 to 5 business days. An examinee raises their hand. What kind of criteria are we being tested on? A variety of things, office mechanic lady says, raising a gloved hand to begin listing them off. Obviously, the ingenuity of the device itself. How feasible it is, if it's only a design. What is it made for? Does it work? How well can you sell it? And I mean you, selling it to us. Not like exchange of currency sale, but you have to convince us that your idea is worth it, that your device is worth it. If you make it as a support hero, that's what you'll have to do, sell your designs to other pro heroes. It's not easy convincing some people to use your designs no matter how helpful it is. Power Loader shakes his head sadly. It took 7 of us, all begging, to install volume controls and present mix stuff. He straightens himself. Right. We're doing this in alphabetical order. So is Shiro Tojo. Judgment time. A nervous-looking boy picks up his backpack and follows the two into the side room, doors shutting behind him. A few minutes later, he emerges, seeming deflated. So it goes for most of them, until they call out Hatsune Miai. Tinkerer stands up, grinning deviously as she clutches her baby to her chest. Izuku flashes her a smile and a thumbs up. Good luck, he says cheerfully, but Hatsune cackles in response. Don't need it, she says in a sing-song tone, practically prancing into the room. It takes a lot longer than most of the other students, but eventually she emerges, oozing confidence. Best of luck, Maki-chan minion, she declares, skipping out of the room. Izuku's not sure when he became minion, but it's a nice enough nickname, he supposes. Maki-chan is next in line to be called, where Izuku learns her name is actually Kura Makino. As she shuffles into the room, Izuku offers her the same gesture of goodwill he did May, but she just stares at him tiredly. If you really want to help, you'll kill me right now. Just choke me out. Slam me into the ground. I promise I'll thank you in the afterlife. Izuku does not kill her, but only beams at her brighter, and she sighs before shuffling in. Her exam is a lot shorter than May's, and in short order, she's shuffling right back out. Midoriya, Izuku, calls Power Loader's voice, and Izuku stands up straight, backpack strap in one hand as he strides in. The panel consists of 3 judges: Power Loader himself, Office Mechanic Lady, and the mechanically masked figure of Lunch Rush, the cooking hero. All 3 are seated behind a large, wooden desk and have sheafs of papers and notes in front of them. Midoriya, here we are. Lunch Rush's voice is chipper and upbeat, higher in pitch than Izuku had perhaps expected. Midoriya, Izuku, scholarship applicant. Quirk is listed as Star Heart, heavily recommended by his teachers, especially one Eridika Sensei. Perfect grades, he lists, scanning down the sheet of paper. All right, Midoriya, let's begin. What have you brought to the exam? Izuku is only faintly nervous, but he plasters a bright face on regardless as he reaches into his bag. It's actually the first thing I ever made. Well, not actually the first thing, but the same thing as the first thing I ever made. In his hands is a large, round metal shield the color of burnished brass. The smooth finish is polished to a shine, and a large green D is painted on the center. A shield, he says, as though the clearly educated grown adults in front of him have never seen one before. They all share a look. Interesting, Power Loader begins, leaning forward. Does it do anything? Its primary function is shielding, Izuku says quite cheerfully, but it's also quite aerodynamic and can hit pretty hard. Earlier prototypes doubled as dinner plates. They seem to take his words in stride, although Office Mechanic Lady jots down some notes. Dinner plates? Could it feasibly be used as a pan? Lunch Rush, of course, asks cooking-related questions. Nope. Izuku replies, popping the P. It doesn't transfer heat very well, so it protects against fire-based attacks quite well. It is quite conductive, though, so the inside is coated with rubber to insulate against electrical attacks. Power Loader nods. Interesting. May I inspect it? He holds out a gloved hand patiently, and Izuku dutifully hands it to the pro hero. He taps it with his claws, pushes on it a little, and generally inspects the build quality before handing it to the other 2, who do much the same. This metal, what is it? He asks, genuinely curious. Izuku straightens. I call it Deku steel. It's a titanium-based alloy with nickel, copper, and iron, as well as some trace other metals and elements. Power Loader repeats it to himself a few times and writes it down. Deku, huh? Is that what the D stands for? Izuku nods. It's hard to get a read on any of them without seeing their faces, but they seem happy enough about what they're seeing and hearing. I like it, the excavation hero says. It's got a nice feel to it. Deku. Short and sweet. Office Mechanic Lady nods enthusiastically. Sort of sounds like Deku, doesn't it? I can do it. I can do it, Steel. I like it too. Lunch Rush hands the shield back to him, and he stuffs it back into his pack. Now, the cooking hero begins. Why did you choose a shield? Compared to a lot of the other examinees, this is rather mundane. Well, my quirk lends itself to metallurgy really well, Izuku says, tapping his stomach, but I wanted a shield because it protects. He looks down at the shield, almost wistfully. I wanted something that would make someone feel safe, something they could hold and think, I don't have to be afraid, because this will protect me. The three share a look again. Thank you, Midoriya, Power Loader says. That will be all. Picking Bakugo Katsuki out from the dispersing crowd is pretty easy, all things considered, especially given that he is angrily stalking towards Izuku like he's been personally offended. Izuku wouldn't put it past him, either. Izuku brightens up considerably as he approaches, which just makes him scowl more. Hey Kaken, what was the practical exam like? He doesn't ask if Katsuki did well or not, because neither of them believe for a second that he won't make it. It was fucking robots, he muttered angrily. Fucking robots. Oh, that was why he was so angry. He was probably stewing over that the entire written exam. Katsuki glares at him half-heartedly before beginning to stalk off. Izuku dutifully follows. I made friends, he says cheerfully, swinging his arms back and forth in a manner that would be childish for anyone else, but just sort of seems to suit him. If it were anyone else, Katsuki would have been surprised at their ability to make friends at an exam. Of course you did, Katsuki grumbles, because nothing Izuku ever does will ever surprise him again. He says that to himself every year, and every year Izuku does something new. Absolutely nobody is surprised to learn that Midoriya Izuku will be welcomed into the support department at U.A with a full scholarship. It doesn't stop Inko from throwing a small party, even if the guests are only the Bakugo family. There's a delicious cake, a better spread, and Katsuki almost doesn't scowl for a moment. Shinso Hitoshi has been hanging around the front gates of U.High for at least half an hour now. There have been a wide variety of odd looks and whispers, but he's always had people whispering about him ever since they learned of his quirk. Before, it had been pressuring, crushing. Now he was in U.A, the heroics department no less. Let them whisper and stare and wonder, because he made it. The only question he had left to answer now was if Midoriya Izuku had made it. He hadn't seen him in the practical exam, but something about the strange boy made him believe he had. Well, all of the things about the strange boy made him believe that, and so he had resolved to wait outside the gates to see if he could intercept him. He wasn't missing him again, not when he knew exactly where he would be. Hitoshi categorically refused to let him be some kind of Halley's Comet in his life. A shock of dark green hair, the color of oak leaves in a rainstorm, catches his attention and he shouts out "You!" again. It takes him a moment to remember that "You" has a name, and he follows it up with Midoriya. Izuku snaps to attention, bright gold-green eyes briefly confused before they lock onto him, and the brightest grin Hitoshi has ever seen spreads across his face. Hitoshi, he calls back, waving at him enthusiastically. It's only now that Hitoshi realizes that Midoriya isn't alone, and next to him is a scowling blonde delinquent that he's pretty sure he saw during the exam, surrounded by a pile of destroyed machines. He finds himself faintly confused to see them next to each other. Izuku's bright, incredible warmth versus the cold, scowling aggression of the delinquent. They seemed so different in just about every aspect that he can't imagine the delinquent wanting to be friends with anyone. But then, he's only known Izuku for the equivalent of a few days, but he still gets the intense feeling that Izuku would absolutely not care about any of that and be friends anyway. He half-heartedly jogs over, flashing Izuku a brief but small smile and calmly returning the delinquent's irritated scowl with an indifferent expression. Hitoshi, you passed. Izuku beams at him, and for a brief moment, he wonders if the delinquent is always scowling because he's actually squinting against the sun. I knew you would, of course, but it's great to see you here anyway. The delinquent is studying him carefully, as though he thinks Hitoshi is full of ulterior motives or hidden traps, and Hitoshi has to wonder if a lot of people take advantage of Izuku's overwhelming kindness and warmth that shines through every cell of his being. His eyes linger a little on Hitoshi's hands, and he realizes he's looking at the bracelet Izuku gave him 3 years ago. Whatever he sees seems to satisfy him, because his features soften somewhat, downgrading from "I will murder someone" to "must be a Monday," and there's something almost akin to understanding in his eyes. Hitoshi is just vaguely aware that he's never actually had anyone look at him like that. He doesn't know why he's looking at him like that, and he's beginning to think he should. Bakugo Katsuki, the delinquent grunts, accompanied by the smallest nod. It seems a bit rude, but a bit rude is probably about as polite as someone like that gets. Shinso Hitoshi, he offers, returning the nod. Izuku is beaming brighter, because his friends are becoming friends, and that's the best thing a friend can ask for. Although for Katsuki this is less Facebook friends and more LinkedIn connected. Hey Hitoshi, which class are you in, A or B? A. Hitoshi offers, sounding unsure of himself. Are you in 1A as well, Midoriya? Nope. Didn't apply for heroics, he responds, and Hitoshi has no idea how to react to that. But Kaken is. Kaken is scowling at him again, and there's an implicit promise that if Hitoshi ever uses that nickname, there will be nothing left to find of him. If you're not in heroics, then? Izuku grins. 1F. Support department. Oh, that makes some sense, Hitoshi thinks, beads warm against his skin. Okay, Izuku says brightly, adjusting his bag straps. Gotta run. Don't want to be late on my first day. You guys should probably go too. And call me Izuku, okay? We're friends. And then Izuku is gone before Hitoshi can even think to shout wait. Katsuki turns to leave, but he pauses just long enough to glance at Hitoshi, and it doesn't take a mind reader to get the meaning. When he turns back to start to languidly stride away, Hitoshi falls into step beside him. Hitoshi isn't brave enough to call them friends just yet, and it feels weird and fuzzy knowing Izuku is so willing to be his friend already. But even Katsuki's silent willingness to be in his presence is good enough for him. The classroom for 1F is a lot smaller than Izuku expected. There are only 6 desks arranged in a loose hexagon, although calling them desks is a bit of a misnomer. They are more like workstations with a laptop and drawing space each. 4 of the 6 stations have already been claimed, and Izuku makes his way to the one in the front left. He can't see Mei anywhere, but the other girl, Kuda Makino, is sitting at the back left, arranging her workstation to her exacting specifications. He contemplates going over and saying hi, but decides to study the rest of the class first. Directly to his right, a large, dusky-skinned boy wearing a cap is face down against his desk, dead to the world. He has a long, silky-looking silver mane that Izuku can't help but be impressed by. His own hair refuses to obey just about anything he attempts. The person behind him was much harder to read, given they were wearing a thick rubber suit in the style of hazmat protection that he's quite sure he didn't see during the exam. Izuku couldn't even see their face, as it was obscured by a full-face gas mask. All he could think was that the entire ensemble must have taken some time to put on in the morning. They seemed content to tap away at their laptop, one that had been modified to accommodate the thick fingers of the suit. Lastly, in the back right station, was a girl hunched over something on her station. The most striking thing about her were the 2 disembodied, gloved hands hovering about her, alternating between working on whatever it was she was focused on and occasionally brushing a stray lock of black hair out of her face. Izuku realized quite quickly that they were the only hands she had, as the sleeves of her uniform jacket were limply hanging where they were. The door slammed open again before Izuku could continue his musings, and Power Loader strode in, full of purpose and poise, followed by Office Mechanic Lady. All right, Ev. He cut himself off almost immediately. Izuku couldn't see what he was doing behind the mask, but from the slight movements, he guessed he was scanning the classroom. 5. There's only 5. Hatsam's missing. Makino raised her hand. Mei slept in, I think. She'll be here shortly. Are you going to start without her? Whispers Office Mechanic Lady, but Izuku is close enough to hear regardless. Power Loader shifts a little, seeming disgruntled. I'm not doing the speech twice, Setsu. Thankfully, they don't have to wait longer than a few seconds before the door slams open again and Hatsum Mei's loud, bombastic voice cries Makichan. You left me behind. It takes her a few moments to realize that Power Loader is giving her the most unimpressed look one can through his mask. There's an awkward second where they're just staring at each other before Mei flashes him a bright grin and salute in lieu of an actual apology for being late. All right, that's enough of that. Take a seat. Power Loader barks, pointing at the only open workstation. He doesn't wait for Mei to finish striding over before beginning. You're all here for one reason and one reason alone. Because you're going to be the best damn support heroes there is. You were all chosen not just because you showed all the qualities it takes to be a successful support hero. You showed all the qualities to be the best. You aren't just clever or smart, you're ingenious. You think outside the box. You have the spirit. Our motto at U.A is plus ultra. It means to go beyond, and that is what you will damn well do. You won't just be great, or incredible, or awesome. You will be the goddamn best. He clenched a hand into a fist, fingertips clanking. Now say it with me. Plus ultra. Izuku responds quite enthusiastically, as does Mei, but the rest of the class seems fairly half-hearted about it. Makino seems more awkward about it than anything else, and the hitherto sleeping boy is very much just phoning it in. That don't sound like y'all mean it. Say it again with feeling. Plus ultra. The chorus is much more enthusiastic this time, although at least one of them is only doing it to make him shut up. That's better. Now introductions. You all probably know me already as Power Loader, he says, jerking a thumb at his chest, but my name is Myheroacademia Higuri here in class. That's Majima Sensei to you. My quirk, Iron Claws, means exactly what it sounds like. But these babies aren't just for fighting, they're also great at digging. He swings his hand out to gesture at office mechanic lady, whose hair has turned a bright shade of orange. This is my sidekick, Setsuna Hanako. Sidekick is an inaccurate term. As I do not possess a hero license, I am technically not a sidekick. But I am Majima Senpai's part-time assistant whilst I finish my PhD in engineering. My quirk, mood hair, is also rather self-explanatory. It'll be a pleasure working with everyone. She finishes off with a small but polite bow. Right. Your turn now, you lot. We'll start with you. Power Loader gestures to the boy with the silver mane of hair, who only looks mildly disgruntled at having to go first. All right. I'm Ogata Togashi. My quirk is steel mane, and at this point he paused to yawn. Means I can harden my hair into steel needles. It's a bit of a pain because I have to hold my breath to do it, and it's really tiring. Then it was the person behind him's turn, who wasn't even paying attention in favor of tapping away at the laptop. Oh, my name is Shitan Shinya, they said, sounding vaguely disinterested and distant. My quirk is Biohazard. This suit is for your protection. I look forward to working with all of you. No further explanation seemed forthcoming, so they moved on to the next. She leaned back in her chair, floating hands raised up in a finger guns pose. Hiroshima Chizuru. My quirk is called Handy because my father thinks he's a comedian. If it's not obvious, my hands are not attached to my body, and I have no arms. Instead, they float around in a radius around me. It's something like 2 meters. Her eyes turned dead cold. You make a hand joke. I will use them to strangle you, and nobody will be the wiser. Makino lets out a sigh and shifts a little in her seat, seeming uncomfortable with the attention. I'm Kuda Makino. My quirk, left to right, is the exciting ability to teleport any object from one hand to the other. There's a limit on size, but I only have to be touching it. I'm Hatsune Mei. Mei, of course, wastes absolutely no time in seizing the spotlight, launching into her introduction the moment Makino is finished. My quirk, Zoom, allows me to see clearly to a distance of up to 2 kilometers. And all that's left is Izuku himself. He smiles brightly at the rest of the class and begins. Hi, I'm Midoriya Izuku. My quirk, Star Heart, allows me to generate plasma in my stomach and use the heat to smelt metals. All right, introductions are over. Time to begin. Open up your laptops. Kids, it's time to learn the principles of good design. After a grueling introduction into the life of a support hero, which involved dissecting a lot of existing costumes and devices to understand why they were designed like that, it was time for lunch. Izuku piled his tray high with a precarious amount of food, earning him incredulous looks from some of the other students, and a thumbs up from Lunch Rush, before he made a beeline to an empty table. Midoriya? Izuku looks up, and immediately starts beaming when he recognizes the familiar face of Ojiro Mashireo, who is only faintly surprised to see him in return. Really, he should have guessed Midoriya was going to make it in easily. Ojiro-senpai, want to eat lunch together? He says, around a mouthful of fried pork and rice. Sure, Ojiro says, because it's not like he had any plans to sit anywhere in particular, and a familiar face is always nice. How've you been? He settles down across from Izuku, his lunch looking like an ascetic snack compared to the small banquet Izuku collected. Izuku beams, slurping up udon noodles as he does. Pretty good. Settling into the new class, made new friends. Ojiro has been exposed to Izuku enough that the idea that he has already made new friends in the past few hours isn't too surprising. What is surprising is the person who sits down on Izuku's left side. He recognizes Shinso Hitoshi not just because they are in the same class, but because there was a rather dramatic argument between him and Ida Tinya near the very start. Hitoshi had used his quirk on him during the practical exam, controlled him, admittedly all for a heroic purpose, which was clearly recognized by U.A, if he was in 1A. But nobody liked the idea of just being controlled like that, and it had left a sort of dark cloud surrounding him that nobody had wanted to get past. Izuku, Hitoshi mutters in greeting, eyes flitting to Ojiro for a long moment before he mutters Ojiro-san as well. Ojiro has no idea how to react to this. There's a lingering fear in his mind that if he responds, he'll be brainwashed, but he knows it's probably a stupid fear, but Hitoshi has already done it once to Tenya. Hitoshi, Izuku responds cheerfully, you know Ojiro-senpai? Because of course he knows Shinso Hitoshi somehow. Ojiro shouldn't be surprised, he thinks, but he is all the same. Hitoshi quirks an aristocratic eyebrow in a slow, deliberate motion. We're in the same class, he says as explanation. For Izuku, it's as though Santa came early and he was leaving the entire sack in his stocking. His eyes light up and his entire expression morphs into one of pure ecstatic joy. Because if Hitoshi and Ojiro are both in the same class, and that class is 1A, then that means. Fucking hell, Deku. You weren't kidding, mutters Bakugu fucking Katsuki, the other person to get into an argument with Tenya, and Ojiro has definitely chosen the absolute wrong time to take a drink, because he's just sprayed it all over himself. How the hell is Izuku friends with both of them? One he could understand, but both? What is the common thread connecting them? Did they all go to the same school? What kind of nickname is Deku? Izuku pauses in eating a salad to correct him. What? No, these are all old friends, Kaken. Izuku is so earnest in his statement that Hitoshi nearly chokes on his saliva because they can't have been friends for more than 2 days unless he's considered them friends since 3 years ago, and what is wrong with him? Katsuki glances between Hitoshi and Ojiro, drinking in their incredulous reactions before he lets a small but amused grin spread across his face. It's not that funny, Kaken, Izuku says, managing to sound chiding even though he's got half a cheeseburger in his mouth. Be nice to them. No, fuck you. This is fucking hilarious. Ojiro is too busy craning his head around to see if anyone else is going to end up sitting at the table to attempt to understand what Katsuki finds so hilarious. If he finds out Izuku has a connection to everyone in 1A, he's not entirely sure what he'll do, but it would probably involve screaming in confusion. Katsuki slumps into the space on Izuku's right and leans back on the table as he peels the saran wrap off of his significantly more edible spicy chicken wrap. Well, if these two aren't the friends you made last time, then where the fuck are they? Mei said she was going to the library and she dragged Makino with her, Izuku supplies, finishing the last of his lunch at last. Part of Ojiro isn't sure how he managed, because he's still only halfway through his own. The rest of him is just glad he doesn't recognize those names because the idea that somehow Izuku was friends with the entirety of 1A would have been too much for his mind to handle. Hitoshi takes this as his moment to interject, and he pulls out a sleek gray smartphone. Izuku, do you mind if we exchange emails? Any lingering doubts regarding the truth of their friendship he held are all but obliterated in the brightness of Izuku's smile. Of course. Hey, Ojiro-senpai, let's exchange emails too, he says cheerfully, already offering his phone to Hitoshi. Ojiro has his phone in his hands before he even realizes what he's doing, and by this point it's too late to stop Izuku from taking it out of his hands and punching in his email. Katsuki lets out a disgruntled sigh, but grudgingly offers his own phone. May as fucking well. Too late to get out of this anyway. Ojiro's beginning to understand, very slowly, what Katsuki means by this. After their first day is over, as is tradition, Izuku waits for Katsuki at the gates and the two of them walk home, but not before bidding goodbye to Hitoshi, who regrettably goes the other way. So, what was your first day like, Kaken? He asks, hands laced at the back of his head as they walk, casually staring up at some drifting clouds that happen to resemble a dog chasing a rabbit. Or at least, to Izuku they do. If he squints, it's more like a frog eating a rabbit. Absolute fucking bullshit. He growls. First there was this fucking idiot Lita Kenya, or some shit fucking furied half-breed of a jock, and a nerd got fucking uppity at me because I had my feet on the desk like fuck off. It's a fucking desk. Desks are for putting things on, it's not going to care it's my feet. And then our dumbass fucking teacher, Eraserhead. Izuku's eyes light up. The pro hero? He asks, excitement dripping off every word. No, Deku. It was just an ordinary teacher named Eraserhead, teaching a class on heroics. Yes, it was the fucking pro hero. Katsuki snaps, and shoots Izuku a glare when he gets even more excited. Don't start fanboying, he's a fucking ass. Izuku takes that with a grain of salt, because if Katsuki was to be believed, nearly everyone they met were assholes, or idiots, or something else. Katsuki resumes his random moment after he's sure Izuku isn't going to start jumping up and down or something else stupid. Fucking gives us a bunch of physical tests and says we can use our quirks however we want. And then he tells us whoever gets the lowest score will be expelled. Of course, I wasn't fucking worried because I motherfucking aced that bullshit. Of course, Izuku adds, nodding in agreement. But after we're all fucking done, he goes, none of you are being expelled. I was just motivating you. Like fuck off you dick. I swear to God. Some of them were probably pissing their pants. Katsuki takes a small breath now that his rant is concluded, before glancing at Izuku, who is back to looking up at the sky, and probably thinking of something weird. What about you? How's the fucking support department? Izuku hums, tapping his chin thoughtfully. Energetic, he begins, we didn't have anything that exciting. Majima Sensei Power Loader, which is so cool, took us through an introduction to design principles. We haven't done any real work yet, but we will soon. He taps his chin a little more, and then he has a sudden thought, jolting through him as he claps his hands together. Kakin, it's nearly your birthday, isn't it? From Izuku's tone, Katsuki immediately knows that he won't like what's coming next. Congratulations, Deku. You can use a calendar, he mutters sarcastically, although it carries an undertone of suspicion. Well, now that you have friends, I thought we could throw a proper birthday party. Katsuki very patiently restrains the urge to throttle Izuku and shake him back and forth because the reason Katsuki doesn't have any friends is almost entirely Izuku's fault. Although he wouldn't trade Izuku for any amount of friends, but he'll never admit to that to the idiot's face. Abso-fucking-lutely not. Izuku starts pouting at him childishly, and his eyes are so bright and enticing. And not for the first time Katsuki curses the fact that it can be hard to stare at Izuku directly, because looking away feels like admitting defeat, but continuing to look is certain defeat. Okay, fucking fine. God damn it. We'll have a fucking party, and you can invite those two fucking idiots, but on one condition. Izuku brightens up even more, to the point that he's practically glowing. He may actually be glowing. Katsuki isn't sure and would not be surprised. What? You're fucking hosting it, Katsuki snaps, turning away. If Izuku hosts, then it means it'll be at Izuku's house, and most importantly, it means Midoriya Inko will be cooking. Having to deal with a birthday party is an entirely acceptable price to pay for that. Deal, Izuku declares, shaking Katsuki's hand for him. Much like any deal with the devil, Katsuki would soon consider this a grave mistake. Somewhere, deep in the Alps of Switzerland, a tall, lanky man with hair the color of a dying sun was humming thoughtfully to himself as he worked, blissfully unaware that he was about to be interrupted by his phone. I'm Miss Sugar Pink, licker licker lips, I'm gonna. He cut the song off with one hand, pressing the phone to his ear with his shoulder as he resumed his work. Inkakin, darling, sorry. I know it's time for our usual call, but something came up at work, and you know how it goes. Across from him, there was a frazzled blonde man wearing a molded half mask covering the lower half of his face, patterned with axes on each cheek, and he was giving him the most incredulous look he could convey. He mouths, "It's my wife," to him, although the other man can't see given he is wearing an identical mask, patterned with flames, and returns to splitting his focus between working and being an attentive husband. Uh-huh. Oh, really? I'll send him a card. Hey, does he still like All Might? Prometheus, can you please focus? The blonde hisses, sounding frantic. Prometheus glared back, his eyes blazing with an inner fire. Ares, I am talking to my wife. It can wait, he snarls, a hand covering the phone. And then his voice is back to its usual, light adoring tone. You were saying, my darling? Ooh, nice. Just like his old man. Ares dragged his hand down his masked face, looking away lest he be drawn into the flames that still smolder in Prometheus' eyes. Prometheus, we have 30 seconds till detonation. Will you please focus on defusing the bomb? Prometheus wasn't listening, although his hands were still deep in the metal casing of the explosive. I see. I'll grab the next flight out. No, it's fine. I'm sure they can give me some time off. I mean, 14 years no visit? I should see my son more than once, right? What? No, everything's fine. Prometheus. Neutron bomb. Defuse. Now, please. Prometheus rolled his eyes and snipped a wire, causing the countdown clock to freeze immediately. What? No, you misheard. Neutral Tom. He gets really angry, and I'm the only one who can defuse the situation because we're friends. Yeah, it's a bit of a misnomer. Okay. Love you. Kiss, kiss. Ares slumped in relief and slowly moved a radio to his lips. Ares to Olympus. Skies are clear. Confirmation code Delta Zulu Zulu Charlie. His hand dropped away, and he fell backwards with a silent grunt. Prometheus. Please. No more phone calls when you're defusing bombs. The radio crackled to life. Hera to Ares. Confirmation code acknowledged. Came a smooth, sensible feminine voice. Artemis will be in with extraction in T-10. Dr. Vesuvius? Was already gone, Ares muttered, rubbing his shoulder. Turned out to be one of his robot doubles. To be expected. The doctor has been an elusive target since the beginning. Good work, agents. Prometheus hummed thoughtfully to himself and grabbed his own radio. Hera, Prometheus speaking. Is it okay if I take the next, 2 weeks off? A holiday, Prometheus? You've got the vacation days saved up by all means, but what's the occasion? Oh, my son's about to follow in his old man's footsteps, he says casually, stroking the chin of his mask. Across from him, Ares choked. To her credit, Hera's voice doesn't even crack. Make it a full month. You'll be on call for consultation throughout, and I'm assigning Mnemosyne as your liaison for the duration. Thanks. You're a peach. Midoriya Hisashi released the radio and stretched, arms cracking a little as he pushed them above his head. Should he buy a souvenir, or was Izuku too old for that kind of thing? Mizudafu International Airport was a busy place to be, flocks of people heading in nearly every direction. Just outside Terminal 12, a fresh load of new arrivals surges forth as a gaggle of onlookers stand waiting for loved ones, guests, and colleagues. One particular arrival, a lanky man with a head of curly burning red hair, casually skimmed over the crowd, looking for a sign with his alias on it. Oh, there. Matsuno Kobayashi. As far as aliases go, Hisashi had heard worse. You're Mnemosyne? He says, sounding faintly amused as he looks up at the figure holding the sign. 7 feet of darkly skinned muscle and a thick drape of white dreadlocks looks back down at him, a hint of amusement in her eyes. Not what you were expecting, she replies, voice deep and husky. He shrugs. I thought you'd be older, he admits lightly, glancing around. Nobody was paying attention to them, but it paid to be sure. Mnemosyne smiles down at him, amusement dripping off her face. I'm 67. Hisashi whistles. Shit, really? Late 60s and not a single wrinkle? Dermatologists must hate you. What is your secret? Genuinely impressed, he leans up into her space to inspect her skin more closely. Mnemosyne takes the invasion of her space in stride. Genetics mostly, but I will admit to judicious use of cocoa butter and regular visits to the spa. Shall we be off? Yeah. His fun had. Hisashi reverts to being bored and disinterested. Mnemosyne leads him out to the parking lot, where a large, blue hatchback sedan waits for them the same way any inanimate object waits patiently. She holds the passenger door open for him before getting into the driver's seat herself, checking her windows and waiting for her guest to buckle himself in before starting the car. We'll be touching base first, she says, calm as a cucumber as she takes off with a screech of tires. Although Hisashi is fairly sure she is not obeying the speed limit at all, the only other agent present in Japan right now is Phobos. Only two? What? You on a shoestring budget or something? Additional agents have simply been unnecessary for our purposes here, she says, smoothly drifting around a corner. The situation in Japan is very different than the one in the West. I had thought you would be aware of that. You grew up here after all. Hisashi purses his lips together, looking out the window. Yes. Well, I wasn't exactly paying attention to the socio-political climate at the time. No, I imagine you weren't. The car weaves in and out of highway traffic in a way that is neither safe nor sane, but neither occupant of the car seems entirely bothered by it, although many a motorist is left shouting obscenities out of a window. How familiar are you with the situation in Japan? He made a face at her, although she wasn't taking her eyes off the road to look back, which was perhaps one of the few road safety rules she was following. I know there's a league of villains, and that all might is the symbol of peace. She does spare an incredulous look for him after all. That's all. He huffs, leaning against the side as she makes a particularly hard turn. I'm sure there are a lot of subtleties and nuances to the situation that were in the status reports that I didn't read, because reading a report is one thing, and experiencing it is another entirely. He snaps, although he seems faintly apologetic the moment after. Sorry, long flight. You could have used it to read the reports, she responds dryly, speeding straight through a red light. But given your psych eval, I imagine you would have rather jumped out without a parachute. That does sound more fun. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, then, but I expect you to at least read the dossiers at base. Our presence is small in Japan because things are significantly more public here. We operate mostly in recruitment and intelligence, headhunting other potential agents for the organization. Potential problems are dealt with by picking a suitable hero or the police and giving them an anonymous tip. We rarely get our hands dirty. She pauses briefly, flicking her gaze over at him. Hera tells me your son is following in your footsteps. Anything I should be concerned about? He exhales slowly, flicking the cigarette out of the window. Concern yourself with driving, old hag. I'll concern myself with him. I'll take your word for it, she says in a tone that completely contradicted her words. The car skids into a parking space with surprising grace, and Namasini starts unbuckling her seatbelt. We're here. Looming over them was a dilapidated warehouse who looked like it hadn't seen a living being for decades, surrounded by an equally run-down-looking industrial district. Where do you guys pick this place up? I didn't realize the classifieds had a section for rundown buildings. I cannot believe I am supposed to work with you. Shinso Hitoshi cranes his head to glance at his teammate, Ida Tenya. They'd been paired off together for the training exercise, in the role of villains. If he was honest, Hitoshi was a little irritated at being the villain, having spent most of his life being accused of just that, but he was willing to endure it a little longer. Besides, this was only an exercise. I said I was sorry, Hitoshi replies bluntly, in a tone that suggested he was not sorry at all. Their opponents were Bakugo Katsuki and Yurarika Ochako, and he had to focus his mental energy on coming up with a plan or face certain failure. He knew enough about Katsuki to realize that he couldn't underestimate him, but his aggressive nature might make him vulnerable to Hitoshi's quirk. Yurarika was more of an unknown. Bright, bubbly. Maybe use humor? Sorry, you used me. The real challenge would be working with Ida Tenya, who seemed very hung up about the whole brainwashed thing. Hitoshi can't blame him entirely, but he does wish he'd get over it. Hitoshi shrugs lightly. I asked for permission, he says, in a bland tone. He probably shouldn't deliberately rile Tenya up, but it was too much fun. He'd never been one to really mess with people, except for bullies or assholes, but something about the idea of knowing he had actual friends, even if it was just izuku, made him feel free from his previous worries about how people thought about him. He no longer felt like he had to be the best he could be because Izuku accepted him without even knowing him. Permission? You asked if I wanted to be a hero. Tenya was sputtering angrily at him, and Hitoshi quietly justified this as a lesson in anger management. He adjusted the collar of his coat, frowning a little at his costume. He had all but given up on his dream to become a hero long ago, and he honestly had no idea for a costume, so he'd just sent in the details of his quirk and a picture of himself and let the company decide. Apparently, That meant looking like he was the host of the world's worst game show. A sequined, purple tuxedo coat with matching bow tie and flower in his breast pocket, with a pair of plain black slacks and polished shoes. Was he supposed to rescue people and defeat villains, or reveal what was behind door number 3? And you did something heroic, he says breezily, adjusting the bow tie a little. I don't see the problem. He still needed a hero name too. Maybe the Question? No, that sounded too Nwari. Mr. Question? Kind of fit the game show host thing this costume had going on, but it wasn't like the outfit was locked in, and he sure as hell wasn't continuing with it. Captain Kande? No, that was dumb. Tinya huffs, stomping up to him. The problem is you used your quirk on me in a clear invasion of my... Hush, Hitoshi mutters, and Tinya fell silent, although Hitoshi hadn't used his quirk on him at all, as he lifted a megaphone to his lips. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. He keeps his voice level and a little quiet, letting the megaphone turn it into a booming voice. Tinya crosses his arms. There's no way they'll fall for your quirk. It's too easily defeated by someone who knows it beforehand. You shouldn't underestimate the power of words, Hitoshi remarks dryly, adjusting the megaphone a little. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can break the heart. And he knows that from experience. He thinks bitterly. But the past is the past. Now is time for the future. Satisfied with the settings, he raised the megaphone once again. Oh, there we go. Hello, Bakugo, Uraraka. Can you hear me? I'm going to assume you can, he calls out, skimming over the entire hall just in case they were already here. Now I know what you're thinking. We know Shinsu's quirk, we can avoid it. And I can see why you'd think that. But you know what? I think you're forgetting something. I don't need my quirk to take you down. Tinya stares at him from behind his Micha mask, and Hitoshi calmly lowers the megaphone. What are you doing? Tinya hisses, gesturing wildly with his arms. You can't take on both of them without a quirk. Bakugo alone would be too much for you. Hitoshi lets him talk, fiddling with his flower a little bit. It was a lilac chrysanthemum, to keep with his color scheme, but he was never fond of them. He would have preferred something like a clematis or a bellflower. I'm baiting him, he says idly. Was it not obvious? Besides, you're here as well, aren't you? That seems to mollify Tinya, but only a smidgen. Do you at least have a plan? Of course. I'm going to keep talking until they give up. Besides, regardless of if they fall for the bait or not, they have to come here to win. Tinya thinks this is the worst plan he's ever heard, but he grudgingly goes along with it. Without warning, the doors to the hall blasted open along with a good chunk of the doorway, sending smoke and rubble all over the place. An impressive opening move, but anyone who had known Bakugo Katsuki for 5 minutes would have predicted it. Both Hitoshi and Tinya are quick to react, with Tinya revving his engines in preparation to attack the first person he sees, whilst Hitoshi just casually raises the megaphone again. Knock, knock, he says with a tone of casual disregard. They don't respond, so he does it for them, adopting the most ridiculously high-pitched voice he can before continuing in his own disinterested tone. Who's there? Theodore. Theodore who? Theodore was unlocked, you know. No response. Geez, tough crowd. Don't worry though, I can do this all day. Movement at the height of the dust cloud drew their attention, as Bakugo Katsuki soared through the sky, propelled by his own explosions and kept aloft by Uraraka's quirk. Tinya lifted off with a burst of speed and exhaust, attempting to tackle Katsuki, forcing him to propel himself backwards with another blast. This suited Hitoshi just fine, as it left him to focus on Uraraka. Hey, Uraraka, do you know why I didn't get any sleep last night? He pauses briefly before continuing. I read a book about anti-gravity and just couldn't put it down. There's a noise suspiciously like muffled laughter, and Hitoshi smirks. I thought you'd appreciate that one, Uraraka. Now, cancel your quirk. No, don't you fucking ga. Ass fuck her. Hitoshi smirks gently as Katsuki lands in a heap just a few feet away from him. Time to go in for the kill. Why Bakugo? We've only known each for a few days. There's need to fall for me so soon. Katsuki's response is to grit his teeth and glare viciously at him, and Hitoshi has to admit, his self-control is a lot better than he'd estimated. Goes to show you can't read a book by its cover. But Hitoshi has a secret weapon hidden up in his sleeve. Well, he has several, some of them actually literal, that he's certain will get a verbal response. Hey Kakin, he drawls. going so far as to change his inflection and tone to better match Izuku's. Katsuki's eyes bulge in their sockets, and he launches himself at Hitoshi without any more warning, a cannonball made of murder and fueled by rage. He does it all without saying a single thing, and Hitoshi has a brief moment to think that he has really miscalculated Bakugo Katsuki when a blur of blue and white is suddenly between them. Tenya's engine is gunning as hard as it can, and his leg slams into Katsuki's stomach hard enough to make Hitoshi wince. The explosion hero, in training, is launched backwards by the force, colliding with what's left of the doorway in an impact that is sure to send him to Recovery Girl later. That was your plan, he says incredulously, turning back to Hitoshi, incredulity coming off him in waves. Really, Hitoshi's impressed. He's so emotive given that he sort of looks like he's cosplaying from a mecha anime. Hitoshi makes a show of patting himself down as if to check for injuries before he shrugs at Tenya. It worked, didn't it? He remarks with a playful smirk, completely ignoring the part where he didn't plan this outcome at all. Katsuki accepts his loss grudgingly, but there is murder in his eyes whenever he looks at Hitoshi. Hitoshi smiles back at him. Anyone who so much as whispers Kaken is treated to the full force of Katsuki's aggression and fury, focused through his pupils into a beam of pure hate. Class 1F is assigned a free period of sorts near the start of the day, labeled creation time. It's 2 hours they get to themselves to design or build whatever it is they fancy, using the resources of the support department, within reason. Izuku isn't sure what he wants to build though. He knows who he wants to build it for. It's Katsuki's birthday soon, and he's already been charged with hosting the party. It's going to be great. But it's not a birthday unless there's gifts. Every year since he knew he could, Izuku has given Katsuki a gift made with his quirk. Those years were mostly things made of glass though, and Katsuki put them on his desk in a small collection. Now that Katsuki had made it into U.A, he wanted to make something more heroic. What you doing? Suddenly, Mei's face is close enough to his that he can feel her breath. The sudden invasion of his personal space makes him recoil slightly, but after an initial moment of adjustment, he seems to accept her presence there. Not sure yet, he admits, it's Kaken's birthday within a few weeks. Mei has a look of complete understanding on her face, even though Izuku is fairly certain she's never met Katsuki. Maybe she has. Get him a grenade launcher. Boys love grenade launchers. It definitely sounds like she has. Katsuki would like something that weaponizes his sweat some more. Oh no, interjects Makino. I heard the words grenade launcher, and I am vetoing this. Absolutely not. Even if you kill me and bury my dismembered body in 7 different locations, my restless spirit will still come back to tell you to stop. Absolutely no grenade launchers. Not after last time. Alwu, Maki-chan, I promise it'll be different this time. That's what you said before last time. Izuku starts to tune them out, focusing his scattered attention span back onto the task of designing something for Katsuki. Weapons aren't really his thing, and anyway, Katsuki's quirk is weapon enough. He'll have to find out Ojiro-senpai and Hitoshi's birthdays as well, and start making them things. He's seen the designs Katsuki submitted to the company, even helped a little, so he already knows what he has. He hadn't been able to talk him into getting a helmet. Helmets were very protective, and making him one now would just irritate him. The grenadier bracers would have already been made by the costume company, and whilst Izuku could probably improve on them, it would be a lot of work and research and calculations. No, he needed something Katsuki wouldn't expect. He blinked, glancing down at the half-formed schematic. All the talk about grenade launchers had made him get halfway through designing one, but an idea suddenly sparked in his head, consciously this time. Range was Katsuki's big weakness really. One of his only ones due to the nature of his quirk, and a ranged weapon would help him, and he could tie it into his defensive theme if he just. Mei, can you code? He says suddenly, interrupting their still ongoing argument. He hadn't been paying attention, but little bits of it still filtered in something about a science fair a few years ago, and a potato battery. Code, she says, intensely curious. Not my strong point, but I can do it. Really, if you want coding, then you should ask. Makino crosses her arms in an X in front of her. If it involves explosions, then absolutely not. I swear on every god, living, dead or yet to be born, I will turn this class around, and there will be no Disney World for anyone. Izuku has no idea what Disney World has to do with anything, but he presses on. There will be explosions, but they won't be my explosions, they'll be Kaken's. His quirk is explosion, so it's kind of a given. But anyway, May, I'll probably need your help as well, if you'll let me look at the Netmaster, because I was thinking of replacing the propulsion with. The three of them started to dig down and discuss Izuku's idea, and after much coercing, cajoling, persuading, and even a little begging, Makino agreed to help. May, of course, had been sold at the promise of explosions. In order to accommodate the small class sizes of the support department, for subjects not directly related to support, they are folded into the general education classes. This sees 1F joined to 1C for English, as taught by the pro hero present Mike. Izuku isn't sure this is entirely appropriate though. Far be it for him to disparage the abilities of the pro hero present Mike. Izuku was a huge fan of his show, and the directional speaker suit was fantastic engineering. But was there just an abundance of pro heroes with teaching degrees, or what? More directly interesting is the revelation that Makino not only has a sibling, but a sibling currently attending U.A as well. Kuda Shiranaki, or, as May calls him, Nakichin, looks like a constantly bored version of his sister. The same, dark hair tied back in a loose ponytail, the same angular brown eyes. They're even both incredibly clever, although Shiranaki doesn't share her proclivity for creation. Really, they may as well have been identical twins, given the only difference is their uniforms and the faint air of constant exasperation that follows Makino wherever she goes. Izuku learns that his quirk, grip, allows him to adhere to anything that touches his skin, and that May frequently uses him as an improvised tool holder due to his unflappable, unbothered nature. This includes her pens and pencils, which dangle off his ear like the world's worst jewelry as they work on a group task. Somehow, he manages to look completely serious throughout this, even when he stands up and delivers some answers to the rest of the class. Izuku's sphere of friendship is growing by the day. He really does need to sit down and make everyone friendship bracelets. That way he can keep track of who is his friend and who he has not yet met. When Izuku returns home, it's to the sound of his mother pottering about in the kitchen and the smell of cigarette smoke lingering in the lounge. This is cause for concern to Izuku, because nobody he knows even tangentially smokes. Izukin, his mother calls, and she sticks her head out through the door. There's a sheen of sweat that suggests she's been in there for a while now, which means she's cooking much more than usual. You'll never guess who's come to visit. Now Izuku is definitely confused, because the only people who come to visit are the Bakuga family and Inko's book club, neither of which are surprising enough to make Izuku have to guess, although the book club isn't supposed to meet until this Thursday. Is it All Might? He offers, and he by no means actually expects to be correct. No, silly. He's upstairs on the balcony. It's a he, and Izuku wonders if this is meant to be some kind of game of guess who. Still, there's an easy way to find out the answer, and it's just to see for himself. He climbs the stairs, pausing only to drop his backpack off in his room before he opens the door to his mother's room, not sure what to expect. A tall, lanky man is leaning over the balcony railing, a haze of smoke drifting up around his head and just faintly obscuring the curly halo of orange-eared hair. He was dressed in a clean, only slightly rumpled white shirt and a pair of matching office slacks, topped off with an untied silk red necktie hanging around his neck. As he turned around, he met Izuku's eyes. Pools of molten magma seemed to simmer around a pitch-black void, and there was the slightest sensation of something tugging at Izuku's mind, matched by an equal tugging in the opposite direction. The second tugging had always been there, but it was only now that something else was pulling back that Izuku was aware of it. "Hey, sport. How you doing?" were Midoriya Hisashi's first words to his son, Midoriya Izuku in 14 years. Izuku stared at him for a long minute, and then turned his head to call down to his mother. "Mom, there's a strange man on your balcony." Dinner was a tense, awkward affair. Izuku can't help but be faintly suspicious of a strange man entering his life, claiming to be his father. He supposes his mother would know best regarding that state of affairs, but there was still something strange about the situation. Why now, after 14 years? What exactly did he do that kept him away for so long? Why did he feel like he couldn't trust his own father? Looking at him, though, Izuku could see the resemblance. They had a similar facial structure. At least, they would once Izuku grew up, and their hair was very much the same mess of curls that refused to obey any command given by mortal men. So, sport, Hisashi began, around a mouthful of rice and grilled fish. How you been? His tone is painfully familiar, like this was routine. Like he hadn't spent the last 14 years abroad and outside of his son's life to the point that Izuku himself hadn't even remembered who he was. I've been fine. Izuku isn't sure why he's so defensive. It's his father. Hisashi takes it in stride, if he even notices. Would he notice? I heard you got into U.A. That's quite an achievement. I know it's only been your second day, but make anything interesting? Izuku frowns, still feeling unsure, but he wants to trust his father. I've made some armor. He offers, just metal armor though. Nothing too fancy. Oh, Hisashi says, nabbing some vegetables. Tell me about it. I'll do my best to keep up, so tell your old man all about it. Izuku launches into a lecture on metallurgy and blacksmithing, unsure of how much detail to go in, so he ends up going all in, and as he speaks, his father interjects with little questions and queries. Nothing untoward or particularly inquisitive, but Izuku still can't shake the feeling that he's being assessed, sized up, analyzed. There's a piercing quality to his father's stare that seems to burn right through him and illuminate every part of his soul. Wow, that all sounds pretty impressive. I'll just have to take your word for it. Sport, Hisashi says cheerfully. It's a lie, Izuku thinks. Hisashi knows exactly what Izuku was talking about, but he can't figure out why. What about your friends? Your mother mentioned you were making quite the little group. Kaken is, well, Kaken. Izuku scratches his cheek, unsure of how to even describe their relationship. He's in the heroics department. So is Ojiro-senpai. We used to be part of the same dojo, run by Sun Wukong, the third, and Hitoshi. No friends in the support department yet, Hisashi says smoothly, nabbing a piece of tempura with his chopsticks. I do have some, he offers, feeling more sure that he can trust his father with every moment. Makino and Mei. They're really clever. Makino's helping me with something right now actually, and Mei is as well, but not as much, and all of Izuku's nerves are washed away in the sea of enthusiasm he has for his friends. And if he notices the hidden relief in Hisashi's eyes, he doesn't mention it. So Prometheus, how is your son? Hera's voice was as smooth and unfuzzed as ever, no matter what distance she was communicating to him from, or time, for that matter. Midoriya, Prometheus, Hisashi leans back in the passenger seat of Namasane's sedan, smoke drifting lazily out of his mouth. Stable, he says after a long moment's consideration, got a good network of friends. He's a good kid, better than I was, by far. So he's not going to hold anyone hostage? Hisashi frowned, clicking his teeth shut. I maintain that the response I received did not reflect the objective academic value of my work, but was because of the bias of the board. Yes, I am distinctly aware of how you came to our attention. And nobody got hurt. Not seriously hurt anyway. He paused. Permanently, at least. Beside him, Namasane stifled a snort. I need confirmation, Prometheus. Is your son going to be a danger? Hisashi's eyes flared dangerously, and his grip tightens on the satellite phone, and for a long moment, it seems like he might explode into rage. But after that moment, he sighs. No, he's not. He has a good support network and a close anchor. He'll do fine. Kid's a lot better than I was. Very big on the whole hero thing. More likely to make a particle barrier than a particle beam. I mean, when Inko told me he was following in my footsteps, I thought he'd set the house on fire. But he hasn't even done that, let alone build a death ray. That's good to hear. Continue as normal, agents. Olympus out. Hisashi sighs, leaning back in his chair again before glancing over at Namasane. Hey, you feel like a burger? I could go for a burger. Prometheus, we already had fried chicken on the way here. You ate an entire family-size bucket. Yeah, but I'm hungry again. I want to see if this local place, Galaxy Burger, is still around. They did an awesome burger, like, with everything, and I mean everything. Namasane sighs, resigned to her fate. All right, we'll get you a damn burger. I cannot fucking believe that fucking furried nerd jock got elected class president. The third day of school saw the lunch group seemingly cemented into place. Although given Hitoshi's actions during the battle trial, it was silently, but mutually agreed to keep either the table or Izuku, or both, in between him and Katsuki. If Izuku himself seemed to notice the budding sense of rivalry between the two, he showed no signs, but Ojiro secretly wondered if that was because he was too busy eating and being, well, Izuku. He knew Izuku could be perceptive and insightful from past experience, but he also seemed to be very selective about it. Recent events were beginning to convince Ojiro that Izuku was a lot more aware of everything around him than his demeanor suggested. He just didn't care. Really? Hitoshi drawls. And were you going to make a better one? Ever since entering Udata, he's discovered a natural talent at riling people up, which is just as well, he thinks, for the purposes of his quirk. Using this talent on Katsuki is probably not that great a choice, but it's good practice. And hilarious. In true fashion, Katsuki glares over Izuku's shoulder at him, scowl in full force. You can fuck right off with that shit. Show me where I said I wanted the fucking job, zombie. I just can't believe it's fucking him. Ojiro shrugs at him, laying out some rice balls from his bento, and not even batting an eye when Izuku stole one. Well, I voted for him, he admits casually, taking a bite out of one. Why the fuck would you vote for that stuck-up jackass? Did your brain migrate to your fucking tail, monkey? Katsuki snarls, slamming a palm against the table. The loud bang drew more than a few stares from other tables and groups, but it didn't even faze the other three. Really, Ojiro muses, he'd adjusted pretty fast to this new normal. Who did you vote for then, Bakugo? Hitoshi asks, snapping his chopsticks apart to tuck into his bowl of somen. Yaoyorozu, of course. Ojiro and Hitoshi both blink, glancing at each other. Neither of them expected that particular answer, but an unspoken agreement passes between them. They're going to milk this for every last drop. You must really respect her if you're using her actual name, Hitoshi drawls, with a smirk that would be playful on anybody else's face. Given Hitoshi looks like he hasn't slept in years, it just makes him seem vaguely deranged. Across from him, Ojiro nods. Yeah, didn't take her as your type. Figured you'd be more into the wild ones, you know? For all his apparent patience during the battle trial arc, it takes very little to set him off this time, and Katsuki launches himself over the table at both of them, hands already sparking with smaller explosions. That's fucking it. Come here, both of you. I'm going to send you home in a fucking jar. Here's what's left of your stupid sons. They didn't keep their fucking mouths shut. Without even looking up from his katsudan, Izuku reaches out and halts Katsuki's charge by seizing the back of his shirt, leaving him flailing impotently at a laughing Ojiro and Hitoshi. That reminds me, Izuku mumbles, finally glancing up, it's Kaken's birthday on the 20th, and you're all invited to his birthday party at my house. What the fuck? Don't invite them right after this shit. Katsuki snarls, settling back in his chair. Well, as settled as he can be given, he is frothing with rage. The vicious scowl on his face promises explosive retribution in the immediate future when Izuku won't be around to restrain him. The discussion is cut short when the intruder alarm blares. They glance at each other, unsure of how to react until Ida Tinya floats into view atop the exit sign and assumes control of the crowd with natural ease. Hitoshi smirks at Katsuki. See, he's doing a great job already. Fuck off, zombie. Izuku later learns there was a villain attack during one's trip to the unforeseen simulation joint. Katsuki is only grumbling about it, so he assumes everything went fine. Near the start of the second week of schooling, as Yamada, present Mike, Hizashi delivered an English lesson to the class of 1A in the early morning period with his usual bombastic persona, there came a knocking at the door just shortly before an unfamiliar head of curly dark green hair, to most of the class, poked in. Yamada paused, halfway through writing a sentence on the chalkboard before he recognized the intruder. If it isn't Midoriya, what brings you here? There's an air of curiosity simmering in the class now, as is typical for any group of teenagers presented with something new and potentially interesting. The boy has an air about him that suggests he's only really half there, but there's an undeniable brightness and warmth to his expression. Ah, Yamada-sensei. Sorry to interrupt. but could I borrow Kakin for a few minutes? And just like that, the curiosity boils over into intense confusion and mystery. Everyone who watched the battle trials immediately knows that Kakin refers to Bakugo Katsuki. Those same people also know that when Shinso Hitoshi used that nickname, it sent Katsuki into a murderous rage. The only people already aware that Mizudafu's local cryptid is the only person allowed to use that nickname without risk of retribution remain faintly curious as to what he could possibly want with Katsuki at this moment. Yamada, for his part, hums thoughtfully for a few seconds. Can you do whatever you need to do here? Best not to disrupt Bakugo's education experience. After all, right, Bakugo? He flashes a thumbs up at Katsuki, who responds with an incredulous look. Education experience? He could fucking do this with his eyes closed. That's fine. The boy who cries Kakin says, already stepping into the classroom, I just need to take some measurements. In his hands is a long spool of loose measuring tape, as carried by any self-respecting tailor. What? Fuck off, Deku. You already have my measurements. With every line that's spoken, every gesture and sentence, there is an increasing sense for the rest of 1A that they are missing some very important parts of this 1,000-piece puzzle. Because Bakugo is being nice, and why does this weird kid have his measurements? Ojiro is briefly surprised to learn that Izuku has Katsuki's measurements, but it makes sense when he thinks about it. The human body doesn't stop growing until it's at least 18 years of age. Katsuki seems to accept this very grudgingly because he doesn't say anything when Deku shuffles over. Neither of them seem to notice the eyes of literally everyone else in the classroom, well, with a few exceptions. All right, back to the lesson, everyone. Questions can wait until after, I'm sure. Hagakure, can you tell me what's wrong in this sentence? Shout it out. As Yamada resumes teaching, the attention of the class is undeniably split between their teacher and whatever the hell is currently happening with Katsuki. Katsuki, by now, is standing up next to his desk with a look of mild irritation on his face as the strange boy carefully measures nearly aspect of his arm, his wrists, hands, fingers, forearms, his elbow. The students closest to Katsuki's seat can hear him muttering faintly under his breath about numbers and materials. Kirishima is treated to the incredibly confusing sight of Izuku's eyes glowing as he works, like some sort of fire is ignited in his mind. It's just as well that he's not close enough to make out fine details, for that is where the devil dwells, and he is always looking for company. Bakugo, can you identify what's missing from this sentence? Throw your hands up if you know it. Despite being treated like a mannequin, Katsuki manages to retain his air of irritated annoyance at everything, which only flares with frustration at being called upon. The participle, he snaps offhandedly, immediately ceasing to pay attention when Yamada loudly declares correct. Can I get a hell yeah? Huh, your shoulders have gotten broader, Kakin, Izuku mutters quietly, and he loops the tailoring tape around Katsuki's neck and jots that measurement down. They're so close their foreheads are almost bumping against one another, and the tension in the rest of the class is starting to steam with confusion and curiosity. Because Bakugo touch me and you die, Katsuki doesn't even seem the least bit bothered by the close proximity. If anything, he just seems vaguely annoyed that the boy is blocking his view of the board. Katsuki snorts dryly and obediently lifts his arms without prompting so Izuku can wrap the tape around his chest, clearly familiar with the process. Of course they fucking are. You try absorbing the recoil, see how your shoulders look after a few years. At his request, Ashido reaches over and pinches Kaminari, but the dream does not go away. How was your costume? Did it fit? Need any adjustments? Izuku mumbles, tugging a little with the tape to make sure he's getting the most accurate measurement of Katsuki's waist he can. Katsuki rolls his head a little, mulling the question over. A little tight in the shoulders, he mutters. Izuku nods, finishes the last of his notes, and stands up straight. All right, all done, he declares cheerfully, bundling his notes and tape in his arms. Sorry for the inconvenience, Yamada-sensei. Yamada just grins widely, flashing Izuku a cheerful pair of finger guns. Anytime, Midoriya, he calls, as the starry-eyed boy leaves the room. Really, this was going to be comedy gold, and he could not wait to share it in the staff room. Bakugo Katsuki has spent years being viewed as Midoriya Izuku's minder by his peers, and so it did not occur to him that their interactions today would be any source of confusion for the rest of 1A until he is surrounded by staring faces and unspoken questions at the end of the class period. Everyone, barring Ojiro and Hitoshi, are all looking at each other the way soldiers do before marching across a minefield, silently asking each other who's going to be the first to risk certain death by explosion. Never one to shy away from asking questions or speaking her mind, Azuitsu leans forward, big wide black eyes peering at Katsuki. "Who was that, Bakugo?" she asks, lobbying the first question in an act of true bravery. His first instinct is to reply, "None of your fucking business," which is Katsuki's instinctive response to any kind of question that relates to him personally. But he knows from personal experience that just ignoring this particular issue will only make things worse. An entire semester where everyone was convinced he was under some kind of spell cast by Izuku taught him that much. Although, really, he just might be. "Deku," he growls, managing to sound at least a little patient. After a few moments, he adds, "If you value your fucking sanity, stay away from him, because it's bad enough that he's forced into dealing with monkey and zombie. He does not need to add any of the rest of these chucklefucks to the circus." Uraraka says, "Not sure why a warning like that is necessary. He seemed nice. And I'm pretty sure I've seen him eating lunch with Ojiro-san and Shinsuken." There's an immediate reaction within the rest of the class, as they suddenly realize that maybe those other two would be more willing to answer questions. Well, Ojiro more than Shinso, but Hitoshi has wisely disappeared. Although to where, nobody is quite sure, which leaves Ojiro frozen in their midst, looking like a deer just caught in the crosshairs of the biggest hunting rifle he's ever seen. "I mean, I don't really know him all that well," Ojiro says, holding his hands up defensively as he tries to deflect their attention away. "Katsuki's his childhood friend. I'm sure he knows much better than I do. He knows Katsuki will get revenge for throwing him under the bus like this, but frankly, the look on his face is worth it." The revelation that Katsuki even has a childhood friend is enough to get their attention off Ojiro, who quickly takes advantage of the opening to start packing his things. He must be some kind of saint to deal with Bakugo's temper for so long. Kaminari mutters and Katsuki's entire body twitches all at once, and there is death in his eyes because that is it. He is going to kill everyone in this room, and there is nobody here to stop him. "You want to say that to my goddamn face, Sparkbrain? Come here. I'll fucking martyr you into the saint of keeping your fucking mouth shut. What the hell are you all excited about?" Aizawa Shoyuta mutters as he shuffles into the room, lifting up a fringe of lank hair with one hand to glare properly at the entire class. "Take your seats. Class is going to begin." When Izuku returns to 1FS workshop, his mind is brimming with potential ideas. He makes a beeline for the metal stores and begins selecting various bars and ingots, inspecting them closely the way one might inspect fruit for bruises or deformations. Rather than pop them into the nearby forge, he proceeds to slowly feed them into his mouth, right in front of his surprised classmates, many of whom stop what they are doing to stare in a mix of wonder and confusion. "Okay," Ogata mutters, hands frozen where they were sketching a costume design. "I am wide awake now." Izuku blinks, mouth full of a mix of copper, iron, and nickel that he's chewing into something entirely different. "That is awesome." Mei's exuberant shout attracts the attention of anyone who hadn't already noticed what Izuku was doing, and she zooms into his space like lightning. "What else can you do? What can you make? Is it different? Is that how you got the metal for your shield? Can I have some?" Izuku opens his mouth to slowly let the molten metal drool out into his hands, shaping into something resembling an ingot before putting it aside when it's cooled. "Yes," he says simply, because it's the answer to all of her questions. "But it might take a while." As if to emphasize this, he starts chewing a fresh mouthful, cheeks bulging like a weird, recycling chipmunk. Mei is only a little bit disappointed at that, but she still hangs around to watch Izuku work the metal with an expression of childish amazement. "Is this for that project you want to help with?" she asks, watching Izuku's pile of ingots grow. "Sort of. I need to make the visor with polycarbonate first, and work in the LCD layer for the HUD Makino's coating. This is for the upgraded bracers and breastplate," Izuku rattles off, tilting his head to the side. Are you familiar with LCDs? I've never really worked with them. Nope. She replies cheerfully. I'm more of a mechanical engineering girl. I can definitely help with the bracers, though you're basing the upgrade of the Netmaster's design after all. The two shared a friendly smile, although May's was significantly more manic than Izuku's, when they were interrupted by a small cough. You need help with LCDs, right? Ogata muttered, brushing strands of silver hair from his face. That metal of yours looks pretty interesting, and I happen to specialize in electronics. For a few bars of that metal, I'll handle the LCD for you. Izuku beams so brightly that Ogata has to squint a little. Deal, he says in an enthusiastic chipper tone. Natch, show me the design, and I'll get to work. The fact that Ogata had intended this trade to be purely business does not stop Izuku from adding him to the list of his friends. Such quibbling little details like that have never stopped Izuku before. Why would they now? Izuku, Hitoshi says during lunch, watching the other boy devour a bowl of ramen bigger than his head. You do costume design as part of the support department, right? Izuku is polite enough to wait until he's finished slurping up the noodles, but not enough that he swallows before responding. Yoo-hoo, he says, ignoring the way Katsuki thumps his shoulder and grumbles about proper manners like he, of all people, has the high ground in a conversation about decorum. Then could I ask you for assistance designing a proper hero costume? The one the company made for me is. He's not sure how best to describe it, so he settles for sequined, as though it explains everything. As far as Hitoshi is concerned, it does. Izuku doesn't really get the problem with sequins, but if Hitoshi says it's a problem, then it's a problem. A hero who doesn't like their costume is definitely a problem, after all. All right, he says cheerfully, setting aside the family-sized bowl for a moment. What's your quirk? It's only at this moment do the other three boys seated at the table realize that this entire time, Izuku has had no idea what Hitoshi's quirk was. Suddenly extremely self-conscious, Hitoshi fumbles with his collar and looks away for a moment. It's Izuku, the literal embodiment of warmth and kindness, so it should be fine. Should be. It's called brainwash, he mumbles. I can temporarily take control of anyone who talks back to me. He braces himself for rejection even though his heart knows Izuku wouldn't do that, because years of experience have taught him this is the part where it happens. He's just an imposter pretending to be a good person, and he's just tricked Izuku into being friends. That's pretty neat, Izuku says, and it's so casual that Hitoshi nearly chokes on his own saliva. What are the limitations? He flounders mentally for a moment, before finding his ability to speak again. A significant jolt of pain can break the control. They have to be able to see me. It doesn't go through recordings or anything, but I can use a microphone or speaker. Izuku nods, pulling a notepad and pen out of somewhere. Hitoshi wasn't paying too much attention. Okay, so maybe something like present mixed directional speaker suit? But it needs to be more than just that. You've got to stand out, be different. Maybe some way to encourage reactions from people. He looked up from doodling a design for the speaker system, blinking owlishly at Hitoshi's vaguely befuddled expression. What's your hero name? Your costume should suit your name. I haven't decided on one yet, he admits, picking at his sushi. What about Zombie Lord or something? Ojiro interjects, leaning forward. Because when you brainwashed Uraraka, she kinda looked like a zombie. It's a bit villainous, isn't it? Hitoshi mutters, fully aware that a bit villainous pretty much describes his entire quirk. Katsuki snorts, arms folded over his chest. How about annoying asshole? He growls, describes you to a fucking T. I'm pretty sure that'd be censored, Hitoshi replies, taking a long draft from a cup of pitch-black coffee. Izuku's eyes have lit up, though, and he starts sketching more vigorously. No, annoying is good. He mumbles, annoying means they're more likely to respond. Let's go with annoying as a theme. Katsuki twitches, before unfolding his arms for the express purpose of punching Izuku in the shoulder. Deku, do not encourage his ass. He snaps, ignoring the amused noises from the other two. Why not? He encourages you. Ojiro stifles his laughter as best he can, unwilling to draw too much of Katsuki's ire, for now at least, but he can't stop little peals of giggle snorts from escaping. You want to fucking go zombie? I'll put you back in that grave you crawled out of, where you belong, Katsuki snarls, cracking his knuckles. but there's not as much aggression behind it as usual. Izuku idly notes that they're really becoming a proper group of friends. See, annoying works, he says cheerfully, ignoring Katsuki's spluttering, and maybe some capturing devices to detain the villains after you've got them to surrender. Izuku presents Hitoshi with a design later that day. It makes him look like a military officer except it has a whip instead of a gun. Hitoshi is conflicted because it's a genuine gesture, but on the other hand, it's very Midnight-inspired, and he's not sure Izuku is even aware of what that implies. Midoriya Hisashi adjusts his necktie, frowning a little as he regards his reflection in the shiny finish of the one-way mirror. He's never really liked wearing suits, so of course he's ended up in a job where they were mandatory. The suits that made up their uniforms were as much for appearance as protection. Complex nanofiber weaves rendered them protected against bullets, knives, and even catching fire. All of which still hurt like a motherfucker. Well, except the fire part, but that was just because Hisashi was full of fire already, but it made life a lot easier for them. And maybe it makes them look pretty cool, he admits, as he admires the way the red silk of the tie really finishes the ensemble. One of the two burly guards standing by the door, dressed in much less snazzy suits, presses a finger to an earpiece. The boss will see you now, she grunts, standing to the side and opening the door. Hisashi's eyes took in the shape of her fingers and nails, idly identifying her quirk as hand-based. She wasn't wearing gloves, like her partner was probably grew claws or shifted nails or something. And he smiles at her with his eyes. It was a technique one had to develop when you frequently wore masks that covered the lower half of your face. Thank you very much, miss. She didn't answer. Miss Tweedledee then, and you as well, Mr. Tweedledum. Antagonizing them was probably not a move most would consider wise. But Hisashi knew they wouldn't act against him. Besides, even if they did, he could use it as leverage against their boss after getting some frustration out by beating them into the ground. The room was filled with a soft, smoky haze as the boss leans back in his leather chair, hands folded behind the back of his head in the universal gesture for complete control. You must be Prometheus, he croons, giving him a gap-toothed grin, eyes narrow and squinted behind his round glasses. Hisashi scans the room with an experienced sweep of his eyes, identifying potential weapons and escape routes. Ashtray to the temple, and then out through the window, he concludes to himself quietly, before slipping into the much smaller chair across from him. And you must be the broker, Jiren. A pleasure to meet you. He repeats the eye-smile, folding his hands in his lap calmly. If you don't mind me asking, but where is Phobos? I was expecting to meet with him. Hisashi taps his fingers against his thigh, leaning back in his chair and oozing calm. There was an unfortunate incident involving the hero killer. Don't worry. The doctor told me Phobos is expected to make a full recovery, although I wouldn't mention the missing ear to him. Jiren nods, deft fingers plucking what was left of his cigarette and dashing it against the ashtray on his desk. I see. Another question. If you don't mind, what did Olympus want with the hero killer? Prometheus leans forward, eyes twinkling. Jiren, he says softly, and the twinkles turn into a blaze. And the underworld broker was already seized, trapped in an inferno, and everything was burning. The world was fire and ash and smoke. And he couldn't breathe. You know better than to pry into the secrets of the gods. Olympus very much appreciates the working relationship that is currently cultivated with you. Finding a new broker willing to work with us would be very difficult if word came out of what happened to you. Jiren slumps in his chair, breathing raggedly as sweat pours down his face. Right, he mumbles, reaching for a new cigarette. Forget I asked. Prometheus nods in satisfaction and leans back in his chair again. Truthfully, Phobos, whilst injured and missing an ear, was still perfectly capable of attending this meeting. But Prometheus was simply a better negotiator. Phobos, as the agent bearing the title of the god of fear, was very good at terrifying people into submission, but Mnemosyne thought a gentler touch was more appropriate. A touch that was still terrifying, but less likely to have Jiren jump screaming out of the window to escape it. Jiren seems to have calmed down a great deal now, although he'd inhaled half of his cigarette. Now, business. What was it Olympus wanted from me? Prometheus taps his fingers against his thigh a little more, looking past Jiren at the collection of books behind him before his eyes focus on the broker once more. There's been something of a change-up within the Yakuza, hasn't there? Olympus wants to know everything you do. Izuku polishes the burnished metal of the breastplate with careful motions, working the oil into every inch to keep it clean and shiny. Having been freshly made, it wasn't like it was in any danger of collecting dust just yet, but Izuku finds he enjoys the repetitive motions, the routine of it. It was by far the easiest part of Katsuki's birthday gift to make. He was still waiting on Ogata to finish the LCD for the visor, and Mei was helping him redesign the bracers, but it was all coming together. "Hey sport, what you working on?" came Hisashi's voice from right behind him. Izuku froze up, seized by momentary instinctive fear before he let out a breath. He hadn't even heard him open the door, let alone walk over. Was his father secretly some kind of ninja? Was that why he was gone all the time? "Oops, sorry buddy. Didn't mean to scare you like that. I brought burgers?" "It's fine," Izuku mumbles, although he was honestly still trying to get his heart rate back to normal, and he turned around slowly, still breathing a little heavy. True enough, Hisashi was standing a respectful distance away, holding a large paper bag labeled Galaxy Burger, with an affably apologetic smile on his face. "Oh nice," Izuku says, returning to his normal cheerful self. "That's the place that does. Burgers with everything, I know." Hisashi handed him the bag full of burgers, cheerfully producing his own bag from behind his back. He was clearly at least aware of Izuku's appetite, but given that his own bag was practically brimming with enough food to feed a small family, it may just be an inherited trait. Given their similar quirks, it wasn't unlikely. "So what ya working on, if you don't mind your old man prying?" Izuku takes a large bite out of his triple deluxe burger, wiping a little bit of mayonnaise off his chin with a thumb. "Oh, Kaken's birthday gift," he says brightly. Hisashi nods solemnly, swallowing a mouthful of his own burger. "Is it a death ray?" Confusion colors Izuku's entire face, and he stares at his father in complete bewilderment. "Hisashi's," he says because he's still not comfortable calling him dad. "Why would it be a death ray?" Hisashi just shrugs noncommittally. "I don't know what kids are into these days." He waits a moment, but when Izuku returns a skeptical but quizzical look, he lets out a small laugh. "It was a joke. A little jokey joke, your old man's bad sense of humor. But seriously, I actually don't know what kids are into these days." Izuku frowns at him a little more, as much because he's not entirely convinced by that answer as it is because that joke was just bad, and not even the good kind of bad, before he shrugs himself. "Honestly, I don't know what other people my age are into either," he admits, "but it's just armor. Well, upgraded armor designed to work with his quirk, but mostly armor." Swallowing the last of his first burger, Hisashi let out a small belch of flame and satisfaction before moving on to the next. "You really like armor, huh?" "Uhu," Izuku replies, already halfway through his second burger. "Armor's important. A lot of pro heroes don't really seem to understand that. But I mean, some of them don't really need armor, like All Might. But the others are just, they've got quirks. Yeah, incredible quirks. But underneath it, they're still human." Izuku's voice turned soft and quiet, his eyes unfocused although they held a gentle glow to them. "Sometimes, I think they forget that." "Yeah," Hisashi mumbled, beginning to unfocus. "All the same, they do." "Work, work, 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 work," blares suddenly out of his pocket, and the moment is destroyed utterly as Hisashi snaps to attention. "Oops, duty calls," he declares, shoving the rest of the second burger into his mouth and chewing rapidly. "Keep up the good work, champ. I'm sure you'll go far." His parting words said, he ruffles Izuku's hair before he's gone out through the door, and all Izuku can catch is "You have the worst timing, you know?" before the door shuts behind him. Izuku blinks to himself, glancing around. He feels like he's missed something important. There weren't any official after-school clubs for either the heroics or support departments. Students of both were expected to spend that time practicing, training, or creating. To that end, UA's impressive facilities were open to their use, from the extensive gymnasium with all sorts of incredible equipment to the support workshops and all the resources that entailed. The students would have to be foolish not to take advantage of such an opportunity, and many do. For Midoriya Izuku and Ojiro Mashireo, this means sparring on a cool Wednesday afternoon. Both graduates from the monkey-style dojo of Sun Wukong, the third, They both still recognize the importance of maintaining their skills, and what better method to do it than sparring with a partner experienced in that very style? Is something wrong, Izuku? You're distracted today. More than usual, I mean. Izuku parries a tail swipe with his staff, spinning it in a hand to build momentum before lashing out in a wide strike that Mashireo easily dodges. He mumbles, blinking his eyes as if he had just been disturbed out of a daydream. Knowing him, he may very well just have been. Oh, I guess. It's nothing, Ojiro-senpai. I told you, call me Mashireo now, Mashireo says, dancing out of Izuku's range. And if you're bothered, you can tell me, you know? We're friends after all. Izuku always brightens up every time someone admits to being his friend. It's kind of adorable, Mashireo thinks. But they've been friends for at least a few years as far as Izuku is concerned, so he's not really sure why he has to do it every time. Well, my father's home, Izuku says, and the way he says it suggests that there's more to it than just his father being home. Mashireo darts forward, ducking under the answering thrust and going for a series of body blows. Is he normally a sudden kick forces him back mid-sentence, inwardly impressed at the improvement in Izuku's reaction times. Not home? Izuku tilts his head to the side. Well, this is the first time I've actually seen him, I think. He might have been around when I was a baby, but I don't remember. Trust Izuku to say something like that like it was nothing. Well, I guess it's natural that his return would bother you then, if he's been gone for so long. Anyone would be bothered by that. Then again, Izuku was not anyone. I guess. Izuku replies, sounding unsure. It's just kind of, am I overreacting, Mashiro-senpai? Well, at least he's using Mashireo instead of Ojiro, he thinks ruefully. Well, how are you reacting? He asks because he has to. He's not yet at Katsuki's level, where he can intuitively understand what Izuku means based on context clues. I feel like I can't trust him. Izuku's staff blurs in a series of sharp, shallow jabs, and Mashireo weaves between them like a river flowing between the reeds. That's weird, isn't it? It's not like he does anything weird. He's just acting like a normal father, I guess. Not that I would know. Really, weird is a bit of a broad category coming from Izuku. For all Mashireo knows, this means that Izuku's father could be doing anything from not buttering his toast to eating crystals because he thinks they heal his chakras. I'm not really a therapist or anything, but trust takes time to build, doesn't it? You've just met him. That you don't trust him immediately is normal. Just because he's related to you doesn't mean you have to trust him. Izuku takes a moment to let it sink in before he brightens again. Thanks, Mashiro-senpai, Izuku says, already seeming more like his usual chipper self. He slides his hand down the length of the staff a little as it makes contact with Mashireo's arm, and there's a barely audible click as his thumb presses up against a hidden switch. It's the only warning Mashireo gets before a few milliamperes of electrical current is delivered straight into his system, seizing his muscles up and causing him to collapse on the floor. Pretty shocking, right, Mashiro-senpai? Izuku pauses, glancing down at him. Are you okay? That shouldn't have caused any permanent damage. It's only a little over half a microcoulomb, so it shouldn't have been too painful. Mashireo doesn't respond for a moment, and Izuku is beginning to think he's miscalculated. He can't have. He double-checked with everyone, including Power Loader, when he suddenly shifts into a handspring, delivering a hefty double-footed kick to Izuku's chest. Izuku goes tumbling down onto the mats as Mashireo cracks his neck. Yeah, okay, I'll give you that one, he says, flexing his still tingling fingers. When did you add that to the staff? Izuku springs back onto his feet, whipping the staff in front of him just in case Mashireo attempts another surprise attack. Yesterday, he says, beaming brightly, I only had to disassemble a few stun batons before I got the basic idea. Of course, Mashireo says dryly, just a few stun batons to learn how they work. No biggie. Well, at least now he's got to be more careful with touching the staff. It'll be an interesting handicap. We're one now, so this'll be the decider. Loser buys the winner a drink. Bring it, senpai. Lightning's gonna strike twice. It was a cool, crisp Saturday morning that saw Bakugo Katsuki tromping up the path to the Midoriya household. It's a little past 9, so he knows from experience that Izuku will be awake enough not to complain too much about being dragged outside to do things that don't involve being hunched over a desk. He knocks 3 times, loud and clear before he calls "Good morning, Annie," to announce his presence and goes to open the door. His hand is halfway to the door handle when it swings open of its own accord, and Katsuki comes face to face with an unfamiliar figure. "Oh, you must be Katsuki. Pleasure to meet Cha, champ," the man says, holding his hand out, presumably for a handshake. Katsuki immediately does not like his overly familiar tone, but his sense of suspicion is in full throttle because he's never seen this man who has apparently heard of him. Working on overdrive, his brain collates everything he sees to come up with an answer. Curly head of hair that makes him look like his head is literally on fire. Bright eyes like simmering magma, with an indescribable pulling sensation. Wrinkles suggest he's in his mid-40s. Open red blazer reveals shirt saying "smoking gun," combined with khaki shorts and flip-flops, no sense of fashion. Facial structure and jawline disturbingly familiar. Conclusion? You Midoriya Hisashi? Katsuki growls, eyes narrowing dangerously. Hisashi beams in a gesture that is very Izuku-like, but lacks something of the charm. "Oh, has Izuku told you about me, Al Whoop?" His suspicions confirmed, Katsuki wastes no time in seizing Hisashi by the hand and executing a textbook perfect over-the-shoulder throw. "You absolute motherfucker." Katsuki roars, hands already sparking with the promise of death. "Fucking leave Auntie alone," raising Deku. "Who the fuck do you think you are?" Hisashi has a relative eternity to consider how to react to being thrown before he decides to just roll with it, although he does shift his body to lessen the impact. He doesn't want to break anything on his vacation after all, and Katsuki's technique is quite impressive for someone his age. "Me? I'm Midoriya Hisashi. Nice to meet ya." He beams up at the boy, fully aware of how badly he's pressing his buttons. Katsuki twitches briefly before he tries to stomp on Hisashi's face with surprising force. Hisashi rolls out of the way with an exaggerated "wah," and then Katsuki is stomping along the ground like they're playing whack-a-mole with the world's worst father. At some point, Hisashi's back on his feet and frantically stumbling out of the way of explosions he's pretty sure are aimed at taking his head off. He's got to hand it to him, the kid's got spunk. For his part, Katsuki soon realizes that Hisashi is, somehow, far too slippery to just be caught by his explosions, so he changes tactics. He was hoping to debut this at the sports festival, but if it means he can blow Hisashi to pieces, he doesn't mind, and it's not like anyone else is around to witness his genius. He holds his hands out, a few inches apart, and begins to form a small, condensed ball of light. Hisashi has a moment to think to himself, "Boy, Izuku really found an interesting pal," before he's forced to react to avoid creating an even bigger scene than they already have. In a single, instantaneous movement, he douses the budding flash bomb with a bottle of water from inside his coat, unintentionally soaking the front of Katsuki's shirt as he does it. "Phew. Careful, kiddo. You could get in trouble setting something like that off in a residential area," Hisashi says cheerfully, like Katsuki wasn't trying to literally murder him a few moments ago. There's an awful realization in the back of Katsuki's mind that Izuku's weirdness is inheritable and not, as he had previously hoped, a weird anomaly. Any future generations of the Midoriya family might possibly end up just like him, and the idea is terrifying because what if Izuku has cousins or half-siblings? How many of them are out there? The rest of his mind is trying to wrap itself around the concept of a man wearing khakis and flip-flops managing to outmaneuver him. Katsuki is 90% sure anyone wearing both of those things at once should not be allowed to be agile nor nimble or in any way impressive, and he can't tell if it was even intentional, which is even worse. Before Katsuki can make a second attempt at blowing Hisashi up, Izuku sticks his head out through his bedroom window, finally disturbed out of his hyper-focused trance enough to see what was happening. "Oh, it's you, Kakin," he says breezily, as though the source of the explosions would have been anyone else. "Sorry, I got distracted by something. Let me have a shower and get dressed. I'll be down in a moment." And then his head disappears back into his room, leaving Hisashi and Katsuki in an awkward silence. "So," Hisashi says brightly, ignoring, or just plain failing to notice, nobody's quite sure. The awkwardness in true Midoriya fashion. "How about some tea whilst Izuku gets ready? And maybe you can borrow a shirt. That one's all wet." Katsuki is left feeling like he has no idea what to make of Hisashi, and it's giving him an awful sense of déjà vu. Later, whilst they visit an arcade so Izuku can win more prize tickets than he can sensibly spend in a single sitting, he usually ends up giving them to random children. Katsuki asks Izuku what the hell his father does for a day job. He refuses to believe him when he replies, corporate consultant, because there is no damn way that man is a salaryman. He refuses to believe he was outmaneuvered by a suit. Your son isn't you, right? Gonna stick around for the sports festival then? The man bearing the title of Phobos has a face that could be generously called full of history. The fresh, just-healed scars from an ill-fated meeting with the hero killer are minor details compared to the myriad of larger, more gruesome reminders of a violent life, including half a Glasgow grin along his left side and the faint light of a cybernetic right eye just under what Hisashi is 90% sure is a bullet wound. It gives him a world-weary uncle vibe, the kind of uncle the rest of the family quietly pretends doesn't exist and certainly isn't invited to weddings or birthdays, but might make a showing for Passover. Not really, Hisashi admits lightly, sitting in a crowded stadium, surrounded by people. Not exactly something I'm good at dealing with. You need to give fire space, after all, or it'll suffocate. That, or run rampant and consume everything around it, and Hisashi is liable to do either when stressed enough. Phobos shrugs, limping over with the help of a cane. It'll be at least another few days before his leg is healed properly, according to the dubiously credentialed doctor they had on speed dial. Why not use our corporate box? Olympus has a corporate box? Hisashi says, faintly incredulous. Since when did that happen? Did you not read the org chart? Six Seeds Agri Corp is an Olympus shell company. Demeter or Persephone runs it. I forget who. They own the contract to supply the food for U.A's catering needs, and as part of that, we get a corporate box for shows, Phobos explains, pouring himself a drink from a well-stocked fridge. Really, the base was as much a place for the agents to reside without the need to rent hotels or apartments as it was a place to work and plan missions, and so it had a lot of creature comforts. Hisashi made a face. Why does everyone think I'm the kind of person who reads documentation? I don't have time for that. I have important things to do. Phobos stares at him blankly, and then very pointedly turns his gaze down to the, admittedly impressive, house of cards Hisashi is building. Hisashi, in turn, just as pointedly, adds the finishing touches to the card balcony. That doesn't explain why we have a corporate box. Unless you guys just like watching them compete. I never got the appeal of sports. It's kind of a nice break from work, Phobos says lightly. I tend to get stares if I sit in an actual crowd. Actual purpose is for talent scouting though. We don't usually recruit from places like U.A, but every now and then there's someone who could be a good candidate. Phobos takes a sip of his drink and casually waves off the sudden change in Hisashi's demeanor. Relax, hey? We ain't gonna send your son a recruitment offer or anything. He puffs his cheeks out and hunches over his mansion of cards. What? My son not good enough for Olympus? He mutters sullenly, like he wasn't just about to explicitly threaten Phobos over it. It's more that two of you would probably drive Hades mental or something. Besides, by all reports, your son's just fine where he is, whereas with you, Hades wanted to— what did he say at the time? Phobos waves a hand about, trying to find the words. Channel my creative energies to a more productive purpose, Hisashi says dryly, casually collapsing his castle with a flick. But really, what's more productive than launching your own satellite? I think he was worried about the part where you were going to use it to destroy Oxford University, Phobos says, already holding a three-fingered hand up to cut Hisashi off. Yeah, the board was biased. Think about it before the mission in a few days, hey? It's a good opportunity. Take your wife out. See your son in action. Fun for the whole family. You only get so many chances before you end up like me. Phobos grimaces for added emphasis, his gnarled and wrinkled face twisting with scar tissue into a mockery of a human expression. Hisashi grumbles something about only destroying the science department and returns to making an elaborate card house. Maybe Inko would like an outing like that? He'll have to ask at dinner later. The polished, orange-tinted visor looked up at Izuku, the gleaming metal of the thick, banded frame designed to encircle a head and provide at least some protection, whilst the thin visor shielded the upper half of the face. the culmination of a week's hard work between several parties. If he was feeling poetic, he might have called it the armor that friendship made. Of course, if he called it that in front of Katsuki, he'd never get him to wear it. There was more to his birthday gift than just the visor, though, or he would have been done after a day or two. A dulled breastplate joined the visor, painted carefully in a basic woodlands camouflage pattern to give it a more military feel in order to better suit Katsuki's costume. But the piece de resistance was easily the Grenadier Bracers MK2. He knew he had originally dismissed the idea of upgrading them, because upgrading them would have meant having to borrow them, and then trying to explain to Katsuki why. Katsuki wouldn't have minded, of course, but Izuku wanted it to be a surprise, and he couldn't lie to him. But he could build them from the ground up, with Mei's help. The idea he had would have involved basically gutting and rebuilding them anyway, so it wasn't even like it was that much more work. No, the Grenadier Bracers MK2 were the crux of the project. Without them, there was no visor, but probably still a breastplate. Going to test them out? Ogata says, yawning a little as he watches Izuku run his fingers over the ridges. Tested all the components by themselves, but it's probably worth it to make sure everything works together properly. Mei lets out a short cackle, picking up one of the bracers and clutching it to her chest. "Oh, my beautiful baby, you're going to rock his world," she croons, rocking it back and forth as though it were literally her child. "Of course we're going to test it. How could we not?" "Of course," Izuku says, nodding agreeably. Testing is important. He pauses to beam at both of them, a wide, pearly grin on his face that is positively blinding. Thankfully, the other two are wearing safety goggles. "Thank you both so much. I can't have done this without either of you." And Makino, he thinks, but she was busy talking to Majima Sensei about something to do with her coding projects, so her thank you will come later. "Really," Ogata says, taking a small step back, "it wasn't much. That medal was thanks enough." Ogata's valiant attempts to prevent what is coming prove futile, as Izuku wraps a surprisingly strong arm around each of them in turn and pulls them into a crushing group hug. Mei takes this in good humor, returning the gesture with gusto as Ogata slumps in their combined grip, an expression of intense resignation on his face. "You guys are the best," Izuku declares cheerfully, arms clenching a little tighter before he releases them both. "Kaken's gonna be thrilled. He must be really important to you to go this far." Mei says, "You should introduce us sometime." The Grenadier Bracers Mark II perform beyond Izuku's expectations. Accuracy is well within expected ranges, but the range proves somewhat more impressive than previously expected, even with the projectile impact with intolerance. It's the 20th of April. The banners and balloons are in place. The banquet is laid out on a table, a veritable feast of various foods, the main bulk of it being Katsuki's favorites, which means anything liable to set your mouth on fire, including a large pot of Inko's special curry. Hisashi is thankfully absent, off on an errand for the company he works for. Izuku is at once slightly confused that he's spending so much of his vacation working, and glad that he's not around during Katsuki's birthday bash, because given their interactions when they first met, it might make the bash part a little too literal for his liking. All that's missing are the guests. As if answering that very thought, there's a knocking at the door and Izuku rushes out of his chair to answer it. "Hey, did you find the place okay?" Shinso Hitoshi blinks slowly, fist raised to knock a fifth time. "It wasn't particularly difficult," he says quietly, lowering his fist after a moment. He lifts his other hand up to show a plastic bag bulging with containers. "My dad made some kekiage." "Really?" Izuku says, taking Hitoshi by the wrist so he can pull him into the living room. "I get lost sometimes, and I live here." Hitoshi allows himself to be dragged. Although he knows he doesn't really have a choice, working in the forge for several years has had the unintended side effect of making Izuku uncomfortably muscular, and doesn't comment on Izuku's response. "Nice place," he murmurs, casting his gaze around. "Thanks. Here's where all the food is. Help yourself if you're hungry. There's some drinks off to the side here. My mom's out doing some errands, and you're the first one here, so we've got the house to ourselves for now." He sets the containers of kekiage down by the feast, eyebrows rising steadily as he takes in the sheer size and variety. He's seen how much Izuku puts away, but it's still frankly impressive knowing his mother made all of this, with or without Izuku's help. "So, What are we doing whilst we wait? Hitoshi has never been to a birthday party. He has no idea what they involve, aside from the vague promise that it will be fun and that there will probably be cake. All of this is extremely new to him, and he's not sure whether to be nervous or excited. Being who he is, he errs on the side of nervous. Well, we've got the Wii set up in the living room. There's movies, board games. Izuku lists off, holding up a hand to mark them off with his fingers. All of which sounds very fun and enjoyable, but Hitoshi has not had a huge amount of experience with most of them. Movies, yes. Games of most varieties? Not so much, except for the occasional RPG, but those tended to be quite single-player. You choose. Izuku beams brightly at him, and Hitoshi wonders if he's made a mistake. 20 minutes later, Myheroacademia arrives, awkwardly traipsing in through the ajar front door and wondering if he hasn't accidentally wandered into a stranger's house. The nameplate says Midoriya, though he's still paranoid. The sound of voices draws him inexorably towards what turns out to be the living room, and he finds Izuku and Hitoshi sitting around a small table, with Scrabble, of all things, laid out in front of them. Quixotic, Hitoshi drawls, laying out several tiles. Triple word score, bonus for using all 7 letters, that makes. He looks at Izuku expectantly, who lowers his face into his hands. 152 totally stupid points. Izuku grumbles with a pout. He glances up at where Myheroacademia is standing, entirely unsure of how to react or respond to what he's witnessing. Oh, Myhero-senpai. Sorry, I didn't hear you come in. Hitoshi leans back from where he's already sprawled out by the table, already drawing new tiles and adding them to his rack. He was too busy getting roasted at Scrabble. Shut up. If this were mathematics, you'd be the one getting roasted. Myheroacademia nods slowly, wondering if he's drifted into a different universe because this is the most normal he's ever witnessed Izuku. Hi, he says, after a moment's pause, holding up a plastic bag of his own. I brought some chips. He feels like the offering of a few bags of chips is kind of mediocre compared to the lavish spread, but Izuku lights up anyway and goes to take it off of him, and gives him much the same information he gave Hitoshi. He joins them at the table, although after another round of Scrabble, it becomes increasingly apparent that there is simply no defeating Shinso Hitoshi, who seems to be a literal dictionary, although Hitoshi himself would attribute his talents to a lifetime of reading. They end up playing a friendly game of poker instead, betting hard candies from a bowl in lieu of actual money. This proves to be something of a disadvantageous game for Ojiro Myheroacademia, as Shinso Hitoshi has had years to perfect an uncaring countenance that is immune to the jibes of others, and Midoriya, Izuku's usual vacant smile, might not be the traditional form of a poker face, but it's sure as hell impossible for Myheroacademia to read. It's fortunate for him, then, that he happens to be surprisingly lucky. The first few hands see him scrape by with close wins, but he does falter a few times when he's forced into a staring contest with Hitoshi's blank stare and Izuku's strangely intense eyes. It always feels like he's teetering on an edge and about to fall. But into what, he's never sure. But by the time Katsuki finally arrives, fashionably late to his own birthday party, Myheroacademia has managed to accumulate nearly 2/3 of the entire pool of hard candies somehow. Of course you assholes start without me, Katsuki grumbles, but there's no heat to his words. Move over, fuckers. I'll show you how you fucking play poker. Katsuki's poker face leaves something to be desired, but his ability to read them is enough to half-convince Myheroacademia that he's psychic. Myheroacademia still comes out on top, for luck is not something that can be read. We better make this quick, Hisashi murmurs, adjusting his tie a little and making sure his mask was in place. I promised my wife I'd be home for dinner tonight. Namasani doesn't respond at first, surveying the empty, dockside streets from the driver's seat of her sedan for anything of note before addressing the other agents. If all goes well, it will be quick. This is just a cursory, fact-finding meeting. Our primary mission is to identify the goal of the 8 precepts, and if at all possible, their quirks. Anything else is secondary. She carefully checks her pistol and holsters it at her belt, and then turned to the others. Jiren's information wasn't as complete as Apollo had hoped, but it'll have to do. We're likely looking at Chronostasis and Tingai as bodyguards, if Overhaul keeps to the rules and meets us 3-on-3, but be prepared for the unexpected. Phobos hands Hisashi a standard-issue sidearm and a few loaded magazines, who dutifully stows them away. We're packing for a meeting, so only the Sig Sauer for firepower and knives for melee. Prometheus, you brought your specialty stuff? He asks as he slips a bowler hat on his head. Oh yes, non-lethal and containment mostly though. Prometheus pats the bandolier around his waist, laden with various grenades, all labeled with different names. What do we know about quirks of those three? Tengai has a barrier quirk of some kind, which would make him an ideal bodyguard for Overhaul. Chronostasis is almost always by Overhaul's side, but we have no knowledge on his power outside of his name expects something to do with hindering you, so keep your distance. Overhaul's quirk is touch-based, but we don't have any other details. No contact, unless absolutely necessary. Ready? Then we move out. Remember, let me handle the talking. They pile out of the car and assume a vanguard position, Mnemosyne in front in all her intimidating glory, with Phobos and Prometheus flanking her in their mikhed amounts of intimidating glory. Prometheus dusts his suit off a little to make sure he was impeccable as they confidently stride towards the empty warehouse. First impressions were everything after all. Standing in the rough middle of the warehouse were their targets, and just as the rules dictated, there were only 3 of them, and all 3 wore masks reminiscent of a plague doctor's. Neither of the 2 attachés had been ones they'd predicted. The one on the left was a tall, muscular man with a ragged-looking mask and a long mane of blonde hair, his fists bound up in heavy plating identifying him as likely being the bodyguard. Tengai was noted as wearing a priest's attire, but this man was wearing a black cloak, hat, and sneakers of all things. Well, Hisashi could appreciate wearing something just because it was comfortable. The helper? The assistant? Perhaps Chronostasis was busy. In the middle, though, the man known as Overhaul was undeniable, from his short black hair, intense eyes, and fur-collared jacket. Overhaul, Mnemosyne says calmly, I am Mnemosyne, and we are Olympus. It is a pleasure to meet you. I understand that the boss is currently ill. My condolences. Overhaul reaches up to scratch the side of his mask with a finger, flicking his gaze from Mnemosyne's stony expression, Phobos' mangled visage, and Prometheus' lazy stare. Noted, he says quietly, his voice carrying significantly well in the warehouse. I understand you have had prior dealings with our organization and wish to continue. That is correct, Mnemosyne says, nodding slightly. Our dealings were few and far between, but we valued them regardless. It is our intention to continue this business relationship into the future, that we may continue to work together when our goals align. She pauses. There is an impression in the underworld that you are taking the group in a new direction. If possible, we would like to continue to work together as I said, but that is only possible provided we have similar goals. Overhaul nods quietly and flicks his gaze over to the black-clothed man beside him, who takes a step forward. Deferring to a subordinate? Odd. What goals does Olympus have? The goals of Task Force Olympus are numerous, Mnemosyne says calmly, although her eyes are widening slightly. Funding research and development, rehabilitating villains, solving crises without public knowledge to prevent panic, all to preserve the stability of the global order, both on the surface and in the underworld. She blinks, and her eyes narrow dangerously. What did you? Prometheus may not have fully read the mission briefing, but he's quite sure that wasn't supposed to be her answer. Task Force. So you're affiliated with the government, but still work with Yakuza? The man continues, blithely ignoring the intense sense of aggression that's suddenly emanating from Olympus. Yes, in order to achieve its goals, the task force is willing to work with and even employ known criminals too. Having heard enough, Phobos steps forward and activates his quirk, Bogeyman, with an angry snarl. Prometheus knew enough not to look directly at him as he activated it. Anyone who did would be struck with an intense, overwhelming, and unexplained sense of dread, ideal for controlling a crowd of people or disabling enemies. There was a unique problem to a quirk like Bogeyman, though, and it was, or Aya, that everyone reacts to fear differently. The bodyguard rushes forward in the blink of an eye and shoots his fist out like a missile. Phobos has enough time to hastily block with his own arm, but the nano-weave fiber is no protection against a club, let alone quirk-enhanced punches. There's a horrible moment where Prometheus can see Phobos Radius and Ulna shattering, arm twisting sickeningly as the scarred agent is blown back by the impact, bouncing off the ground with a muffled cry of pain. Prometheus didn't have to be a doctor to tell that he wasn't going to be using that arm anytime soon. "White out," he calls, slipping a thin, cylindrical grenade out from his coat and hurling it at Overhaul and the others. Instead of detonating and releasing its payload as it should have, it seemed to flicker before vanishing completely from sight. The sound of it going off was undeniable though, however distant, and he flicks his gaze up to the roof where a large white glob was suddenly present among the rafters and the vague shape of an arm could be seen sticking out. Idly, he notes that whoever did that had to have been extremely loyal to Overhaul to just teleport an unknown grenade to themselves. But fortunately for them, Prometheus always packed a plan B. He hurls a set of black little balls to the ground just in front of him as quickly as he can, intently aware that if the bodyguard reacts fast enough, it's already over. The balls burst into clouds of thick, choking smoke, covering him and hopefully giving the Yakuza pause before they swoop in and finish them off. Swiftly, he pulls out 2 more wide-out grenades and bounces them along the ground, one towards Overhaul and the other towards where the bodyguard was. The moment they disappear into the smoke, gunshots ring out alongside the soft pop of the grenades detonating, and Prometheus is thrown back as several rounds find their mark at his solar plexus. The nanofiber weave can protect him against, but it still hurts. Ugh, right in the 10 zone. He groans, arching his back a little before rolling over and reaching into his coat to pull out a round metal orb, covered in patches of sticky resin. He presses it down against the ground and thumbs the activation switch, staggering to his feet and heading over to where Mnemosyne is helping Phobos to his feet. Holding them off, Mnemosyne hisses, as Phobos does his best to haul himself up with her help. He can't quite hang off her shoulder, given their height difference, so she just picks him up in a princess carry. Prometheus reaches up to adjust his mask a little, covering his ears and pressing down, sparing a moment to give her a nod. "Mandrake down. Should keep them off of us." Mnemosyne mimics the adjustment, and Phobos follows suit weakly with his good arm. The 3 of them barge out of the warehouse as a horrible ear-shredding shriek is emitted from behind them, shattering the warehouse glass as they flee. They rush towards the sedan before any potential reinforcements Overhaul had in reserve decided to pursue and turn a bad situation into a critically bad one. With Phobos carefully secured in the back seat, still gritting his teeth in agony, Mnemosyne gunning the engine as hard as she could, Prometheus felt he was free to let out a breath and pull his mask off, and Mnemosyne, similarly, releases the sound cancellation. Prometheus stretches before he looks back through the rear windscreen and nearly chokes. Standing in the open doors, unharmed and unfettered, Overhaul watches them drive away with a dispassionate look. "Mnemosyne?" Prometheus mutters quietly, reaching for his side arm, "Floor it," before Overhaul goes full Terminator on us and latches onto this car. She glances in the rearview mirror to see what he's talking about and swears colorfully in several languages. Prometheus picks out Arabic and Polish before the engine drowns her out. She accelerates as hard as she can, tires screeching angrily as the car ramps up even faster. Fortunately for them, Overhaul is content to watch them go without doggedly pursuing them, which is just as well, because Prometheus isn't actually sure they could stop him if he shrugged off everything he threw at him so far. The whiteout might have missed him, but the Mandrake should have destroyed his inner ear. There was no way he should have been able to stay upright, let alone casually walk out after them. What sort of monster is he? Only when they're safely an hour away and Mnemosyne has a satellite phone out to contact one of Olympus' healers does Prometheus slump back in his seat and relax, or at least, relax as much as someone like him can. There's a painful bruise already blooming on his chest that he's going to feel for the next few days. He should probably get checked out, make sure his ribs didn't crack or anything. He's down 4 grenades, and they barely got anything out of the meeting except that it was generally a mistake, and Overhaul was apparently a Terminator. Well, that didn't go to plan at all. There are a few saving graces to the disastrous outcome. Phobos will get some new scars from the surgery to repair his arm. Mnemosyne did manage to learn some information about the 8 precepts. and Hisashi still made it to the dinner date with his wife. After consuming much of the laid-out feast, several rounds of various games, Izuku explains his unerring accuracy with green shells as being based on geometry. Katsuki explains it as Izuku being a nerd, and the time finally comes for Izuku to unveil his secret project. In an act of true showmanship, Izuku has constructed a small stand for it in his spare time out of scrap metal and draped a large cloth over it. He pushes it out on wheels liberated from an old scooter and stands by it proudly, one hand on the cloth ready to unveil his greatest creation yet. For his part, Katsuki is waiting as patiently as Katsuki ever does, which means he's tapping a foot against the ground and scowling fiercely. Fortunately for him, Izuku does the unveiling in short order. "Tadea," he cries, pulling the cloth back. "It's an upgrade to your hero costume, a breastplate for protection," and he raps his knuckle against the metal for emphasis before pointing at the other two parts in order, a visor and the new grenadier bracers MK2. Without waiting for Katsuki to react, Izuku reaches over to grab the visor from where it's sitting on its stand and toss it over at him. "Try it out." Katsuki frowns at it momentarily, turning it over in his hands as Hitoshi and Mashireo peer a little closer, at a safe distance to avoid setting Katsuki off. "What's it do?" he mutters, slipping it onto his head and letting the bands click into place. A snug fit, as expected. Press the switch on the side. There's a small click as Katsuki does exactly that, and suddenly the visor lights up, eliciting a small noise of surprise. "Shots loaded, 6 left, 6 right? What the fuck does that mean? Wait, targeting reticules?" Izuku is beaming again, and he lifts up one of the bracers and presses down on one of the panels. Another small click can be heard, as a panel near the front of the bracer tilts open to reveal a small opening. Beanbag rounds. They're in each bracer, and you can load up to 6 at a time. The targeting reticule helps you aim. When you've got them active, it uses an infrared laser to, well, it figures out where you're pointing it and tells you through the heads-up display. Accurate up to about 50 feet, but maximum range is something around 80. Izuku pauses to amp up his beaming by a few megawatts. "So what do you think?" "Dude, awesome." Mashireo is in total and complete awe of Izuku's creations, turning the other bracer over in his hands. A little part of him wanted to ask Izuku to make him something like this, but it didn't feel right to impose on his friend. But maybe on his birthday, he'd be getting something just as incredible. Hitoshi lets out a low whistle, but he's not admiring the bracers like Mashireo, as his eyes are on Katsuki. "I think you broke him," he says quietly, tilting his head to the side to get a better perspective. He looks like he's caught between declaring his undying love for Izuku and attempting to maintain his standoffish, aggressive nature. Hitoshi is very tempted to take a picture right then and there, have it framed, and put it in a gallery as the duality of man. Eventually, though, Katsuki's gratitude wins out over his desire to keep up his appearances to at least Hitoshi and Mashireo, and he wraps his arms around Izuku in a bone-crushing hug. I fucking love it. Chemicals had never been Izuku's strong point. They weren't very useful with his quirk, although he could still consume them all the same. They were finicky and volatile, and they smelled just awful. Still, he had to admit, watching Shitan Shinya work had something vaguely magical to it. He knew enough about chemistry to identify the basic principles, but what he was actually doing was far beyond him. It may as well have been wizardry, really. Shinya stops just as he was about to pour something clear and cyan into an Erlenmeyer flask already filled with something murky green, and his gasmus-covered face turns to look at Izuku. "You've been staring at me for 10 minutes and 23 seconds. Do you require my assistance, Midoriya?" He hadn't realized he'd been staring for that long, but he puts on a bright smile regardless. "I was originally going to ask something, but I got distracted watching what you were doing. What are you making?" The impassive, undefinable stare continues for a few more moments before he turns back to his work, carefully pouring it into the flask. "I am making nothing. I am merely distilling and isolating the chemicals produced by my quirk." He places the flask on a stand above a Bunsen burner and watches as it begins to slowly boil. "Oh, are they useful?" Izuku can't help but being a little curious, and as long as Shinya is answering his questions, he'll keep asking them. "No, The answer is flat and blank. I am merely attempting to gain a better understanding of my quirk. The murky blue-green solution evaporated slowly to leave behind translucent little crystals, like salt. I would avoid interacting with them if I were you. Please wear safety goggles if you wish to approach any closer for your own safety. Now Izuku is really curious. He approaches casually, after snapping some goggles onto his face and leaning far too close to the flask to be considered safe. Neat. He chirps, squinting at the crystals. They have a faint cloudiness to them, but Shinya empties the flask into a petri dish regardless and seals it shut with a click. Does your quirk produce a lot of different chemicals? It is very messy actually, he says, in that bland tone of his as he holds the petri dish up, letting the light catch the trapped crystals. I have isolated 33 unique products of biohazard and will likely learn of more with continued testing. With practice, I am able to regulate what I produce, but I am unable to cease production. Thus, I must understand what I am capable of producing. Izuku snaps his fingers, eyes lighting up. That's what I was going to ask. May wants the class to team up for the sports festival, and I was curious if you were willing to join? He says it as though the topic had reminded him, but really, they weren't even mildly related. Shinya freezes, his otherwise steady gloved hands twitching just a little. He nearly drops the petri dish he was holding, but thankfully, he sets it down safely. No, he says stoically, turning to regard Izuku properly again, I am not. The activities of the sports festival are liable to cause damage to my isolation suit. That would be inadvisable. Really? Izuku says, only vaguely aware that he doesn't actually know what the U.Sports festival entails. He just kind of assumed it would be like the sports festivals he participated in primary and middle school. But really, that was a silly assumption, wasn't it? What part of U.A was like normal schools? I suppose that's a good point. I didn't think of that. There's a brief silence as they stare at each other, Izuku's bright grin against the unreadable gas mask. Then Shinya turns back to his flasks and chemistry. I will cheer for any of us who participate, as is appropriate for a classmate. Pause. Good luck, Midoriya, if you intend to compete. Izuku beams back at him, gently placing a hand on the suit's shoulder. Not that he was really sure Shinya could even feel it through the thick rubber. I do, and thanks. Of course, Izuku isn't going to join forces with Mei, regardless of the power of such a union. If he's going to join forces, there's only one person he'd ever do it with. Your corporate box, ladies and gentlemen, the attendant says with a small flourish. Please enjoy the sports festival. Olympus corporate box. Well, technically it was Six Seeds Agri-Corps, but they were technically Olympus anyway, so was a lavish thing, with a single row of felted, cushioned seats, a bar well stocked with drinks and snacks, and most importantly as far as Hisashi was concerned, high-quality air conditioning. Wow, Midoriya Inko murmurs, taking in every detail, from the immaculate and soft carpet to the delicately cut crystal lights hanging from the roof. And your company pays for this? Oh, she was just too adorable, Hisashi thinks. He feels a little bad that she'd never experienced this kind of luxury when he was almost accustomed to it. He was just as accustomed to living in literal caves, though, so it sort of balanced out, but he beams at her all the same. Yup, Six Seeds is a part of the Umbrella Corporation, so you can have access freely. It's only U.A, though. They don't have boxes for the other stadiums or shows, unfortunately. He strolls over to the bar and pours himself a few fingers of brandy. Want a drink, Kurobi? Namasani smiles back at Hisashi, brushing a lock of white hair from her face. A glass of the apple mango juice, please. I haven't had a drink of alcohol since I was a teenager. She turns her attention to Inko, a charming smile on her face as she bows politely. It is truly a pleasure to finally meet you, Inka-san. Hisashi never fails to talk about you, she says smoothly, glancing at Hisashi with a vague sense of amusement, even when it is not appropriate to do so. Inko titters a little, a slight flush to her cheeks. Oh goodness. It's a pleasure to meet you too, Kurabe-san. Thank you for taking care of my husband, she says, ignoring Hisashi's melodramatic crying in the background. It's nothing, Namasani replies, giving Hisashi an amused look. I am used to working with colorful characters like your husband. Is the ceremony starting? Hisashi says cheerfully, I think it's starting. Here's your juice, Kurobe. He thrusts the glass at her pointedly. and she takes it with a twinkle in her eyes. I suppose we'd better settle in. Hate to miss a thing. Sure you won't change your mind, Izuku? Mei says, face right up against Izuku's. Think of the team we could make if we worked together. The support companies will all be watching. As students of the support department, don't we owe it to them to create an unforgettable show? Izuku laughs lightly, but he does take a small step back away from Mei. We will. It'll be more impressive if our babies fight for supremacy, isn't it? That gets her attention, which is exactly what Izuku calculated it to do. He carefully extricates himself from the situation as she gets lost in fantasies of technological supremacy so that he can check in with the rest of 1F. Somehow, Mei managed to badger everyone in the class into participating with the exception of Shinya, who abstained due to safety concerns. Even Ogata, who had explicitly claimed he would rather die than participate in anything with the word sport in its name, was here, although he certainly looked like he would much rather be dead as he talked to Chizuru. He strides over to where Makino is checking her equipment and beams at her. Excited? She glances up, blowing a loose strand of hair from her face. Grumbling, she tucks it behind an ear when it simply falls back into her face with little fanfare. I guess. It's a good chance to make a name for ourselves, but it's our first year. There'll be 2 more festivals. Festivals I'll have more time to prepare for. It'll be fun, you know? Izuku says, rocking back on his feet. We'll only be competing against other first years. Yeah, from the heroics department. This is classic jock versus nerds. As if to answer that very statement, the muffled sound of a roaring crowd could be heard. Her expression twitched a little. You know, it's not too late. If you snap my neck now, even if I'm still alive, I won't have to participate. Izuku laughs it off, the way he laughs off a lot of things. Come on, it won't be that bad. I'm sure you'll do great. An alarm buzzes, and the class of 1F collectively wrap up whatever it is they were doing at the moment to file out in an orderly fashion. And here's classes F, G, H of the support department. If you feelin' it, shout it out. The roar of the crowd wasn't as deafening as the one they heard earlier, but there was still a level of excitement to it. Izuku himself had never seen so many people all in one space. Well, maybe at the mall, but he doesn't like to think about that. Somewhere in the crowd are his parents, but he has no idea where they'd be. Silently, he wondered what it must be like for Mei, but when he looks over at her. Oh, there they are. Judging from the lanyards. Hemashida Support Agency, huh? Oh, and over there's the Yamatsu group. Well, she doesn't seem like she's particularly concerned if her parents are watching. Will the player representative, Bakugo Katsuki of 1A, please step up? The freshman referee, Midnight, calls as she dramatically cracks her whip. Izuku brightens a little as he watches Katsuki come forward, oozing composure to the point of arrogance with his slouched, casual stride. He's not even scowling, his expression has a more determined frame to it. Izuku's glad to know that Katsuki is taking this seriously enough to feel challenged. He'd hate to think he was stagnating in Udare of all places. Any words, Bakugo? Katsuki turns around to face the rest of the other classes. For a moment, his eyes meet Izuku's. Izuku beams back, and Katsuki lets the tiniest smirk onto his face. Yeah, he says into the microphone Midnight was holding out to him. I'm going to place first. There's a collective uproar from the gathered students, but all Izuku lets out is a small laugh. That's the guy we made the bracers for, right? Mei asks, narrowing her eyes as she presumably examines him in great detail with her quirk. Impressive confidence. He's not bluffing. Interesting. Doesn't mean we're just going to let him have his way, are we, Maki-chan? I don't remember agreeing to this. Despite her words, Makino's expression is one of resignation. I'm going to generously assume he painted that target on himself intentionally. That part is directed at Izuku, the only person amongst 1F who was familiar enough with Katsuki to answer such a question. Oh yeah, he says cheerfully, rolling his shoulders in anticipation. Kakin wants them to come for him with everything. If they don't, he can't call it a true victory. Makino makes a face. Great. Why is everyone in this school insane? Is there no such thing as a normal person? She shakes her head. He'd better be careful making claims like that. There are a lot of people who won't take a claim like that lying down. Any further discussion was cut off by Midnight's next announcement. The first round. An obstacle race. Over there. 1F. My, what an eclectic little gang. Goodness. You didn't tell me Hatsum May was in the same class as your son, Hisashi, Namasani murmurs, adjusting her binoculars. Hisashi frowned. That's because I don't know why that's important. Besides, I only knew her vaguely as May. He murmurs back, glancing over to where Inko was pouring herself a glass of juice before the race began proper. He didn't like talking business with his wife so close. Hatsum May is brilliant. We've had an eye on her since her 5th grade science fair project was in the local news. A rocket-powered skateboard, you would have liked it. She's a potential candidate for the Muses division. Muses? Inko says inquisitively, right behind Hisashi. You'd think with a decade or two of experience under his belt, he'd hear his wife sneaking up on him like that. But even after years apart, his finely honed senses still just registered her as non-threatening. Like a rabbit. A very cute rabbit. The Muses, Namasani says smoothly, ignoring the glare Hisashi shoots her, are what we call our R&D division. Students from the support department often display the ingenuity and engineering we seek in candidates. The race is starting, Hisashi says in a clipped tone, changing the topic with his usual levels of subtlety and deftness. The crushing press at the start of the race is not what Izuku considers a good time. His saving grace is that it is so very temporary. For the moment the signal goes off, everyone rushes out, and it's the perfect opportunity for him to break away from the crowd. Or rather, he thinks as he presses his left thumb to his left pinky finger for the crowd to break away from him. Immediately, he's surrounded by a corona of electricity, sparking off him and lancing out like a crackling cloud and shocking everyone in his immediate vicinity. Sorry, he calls out, already feeling like he can breathe again. I'm sure Recovery Girl will fix anything. It's nowhere near enough to seriously hurt anyone, and given the distributed nature of it, it's not enough to bring down most of the people around him. There's still something to be said about a sudden and unexpected electric shock, which, much like a cattle prod, has the desired effect of getting everyone to scatter away from him. A shocking development from one of the support students. But what's this? He might just get frozen in his tracks. Ice is spreading along the ground, and Izuku can see the back of one of the other students. From 1A, he thinks. He recognizes the red-white hair, running ahead and leaving frost in his wake. He's tempted to see how everyone else is dealing with it, but he doesn't have time to consider people who aren't him, so he does the first thing he can think of. He whips the shield from his back, unfolds his staff, and uses it as a toboggan, skidding across the ice in a barely controlled manner. The staff has been improved even further from its original design, broken up into folding sections that click together for easy storage and transport, and the smooth finish of the shield is perfect for gliding along the slick ice. All in all, he's turned this particular player-made obstacle into an advantage, although he can see several other students pulling up ahead of him easily. Nice trick, Izuku, but you'll have to do better to beat us. May calls from his left. Us is apparently May, Makino and Makino's brother, Shiranaki. Somehow, Shiranaki has found the time to shed both his shirt and his shoes, sprinting across the ice as though it were ground as sure and stable as concrete. May is riding on his shoulders like it's the most natural thing in the world, and Makino is clinging to his waist, feet sliding along the ice, and an expression of utmost defeat on her face. She looks Izuku straight in his eyes and mouths, "You could have prevented this, damn." He beams back at her. May bares her teeth in what is probably supposed to be a grin, but just sort of terrifies normal people. "Rockets, activate," she declares, hunching over a little in preparation. Without missing a beat, Shiranaki stops sprinting and starts sliding, lowering himself a little for stability as May activates a miniature jet engine strapped to her back, propelling them even faster along the ice. "See you later, Midoriya," Shiranaki says breezily, completely at ease with everything that's going on. "See ya," Izuku replies, just sort of happy to be here. Someone cries out that teaming up should be illegal, but ultimately, just about anything goes cooperative or competitive. The sound of explosions lets him know that Katsuki is hard at work being Katsuki, and he manages a Johnny wave to him as he passes by, but he doesn't think Katsuki noticed. He's fine with that. He's always been the kind of person who only has eyes for the prize in competitions or contests. At some point, though, The ice road, as he began to think of it, comes to an end, and when it does, it's rather conveniently at the next phase of the obstacle race. Rather than convenient, Izuku thinks it's probably just the natural result of things. It's not as though that guy could continue just making ice all the way without at least taking the time and focus to tackle the obstacles. Had this been any other time, Izuku would have been gushing over the sight of massive robots barring his way. As it is, he doesn't really have time to sit down and wonder how they work. Well, maybe a little. No bad thoughts. Don't get distracted. So he focuses instead on trying to figure out what to do about them. If he were Katsuki, he wouldn't smash through them. Katsuki liked destroying things, but he liked winning even better. He'd probably just try to go over them, a path Izuku could not use. Or could he? Unbidden, a memory of his lessons with Master Wukong floats to the top of his mind. Remember, Midoriya? When fighting an enemy, a clever monkey relies on the jungle to provide. What jungle? The urban jungle. Buildings, signposts, vehicles, even your enemies. Master the art of using these tools. Improvise. Well, he didn't necessarily have to improvise. Not when he had just the perfect tool for this. Up his sleeve too, which was just perfect for commentary purposes. Not that there was anyone listening. He could tell myheroacademia about it later. He'd appreciate it. He holds his arm out and launches a thin needle-like grappling hook from a contraption hidden in his sleeve, aiming for the head of one of the massive machines bearing down on him. The moment it makes contact and he feels the engine in his utility pack, he thought about making a belt, but he couldn't fit everything he wanted in it. Start to reel him in. He kicks off the ground, wraps the cable around his hand as best he can, and swings himself up into the air. He can see a few other students employing similar tactics with their individual quirks, and he lets a small smile spread across his face. Those quirks were very impressive, sure, but his utility pack could not be matched. He jerks a cord, and a pair of wings unfolded, the thin fabric membrane catching the air as he begins to